terrible at this.
Well, I mean,
no,
yeah.
I think it's on.
No, I think Daniel knows. Daniel knows how it works. Hello, everybody. Mike in Space is saying that we successfully made him stare at a blank YouTube screen for the last 20 minutes. So, Mike in Space, welcome. I know that you're there. Unless you stop staring.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
That's how you build hype.
Yeah, that's take a lesson, everybody.
We got everyone very excited. I think. Oh, first of all,
well, that's on them. I wouldn't be excited.
Oh my God, you guys are making a weird echo loop, as if it. Oh my God.
Is everything fine? Paul's muted. Paul's muted himself. Everybody, Paul's dead.
Don't you hear this? Don't you hear a long echo loop?
No.
No, I hear myself.
No, I don't hear anything.
I think that you're listening to. I think, Paul, what's happened is you have two. I think you have the YouTube open, and I think you have this chat open.
Yes, that is what happened. I've
used my thinker and I've thunk, and I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to meet the YouTube stream.
Okay, there we go.
So as a seasoned
low. There we go. Okay, and I thought that something strange was happening with
well, it was. It's that you're running the audio.
Yeah. So that's good. So whatever viewer we had, we lost. I closed the window, so we lost that one viewer. That was me.
And, never trust people who are trying to act too competent and too professional, because that's suspicious.
You're like the Noam Chomsky of audio, Paul.
The Noam Chomsky of audio. I have a universal grammar of.
You're just really good at linguistics, but not really great at this. But you but you seem to have an opinion on this.
There you go.
Let's see. I took notes.
That was good. So having Mike in Space stare at a screen and having me think there was an echo. That's kind of what we're aiming for.
It's ruinous.
Well, did you see the movie Poltergeist?
No one saw that movie. Did you watch that movie?
I don't think so.
So they spend a lot of time staring at a blank screen in that movie.
There's a reason no one watched that movie. All right, Paul.
I like Poltergeist.
I was going to say, like, how many stars do you give it out of 4?
Oh my God. Okay. I've got the YouTube stream open too. This is a very nice looking Junseth Smart. Fuck you, Mr. 1234 Cordy ASD.
Oh my God, people are talking about.
Yeah. Mike in Space says here, well, if these guys ever show up, you can always catch their crazy antics on Bitcoin Car Talk. I'm here. Sounds fine to me. Okay, Mike in Space is there, so that's good. We have one listener.
Yeah, well, that's really all. I mean, he's Canadian, so.
Paul, you have 400 subscribers. Did you pay for them?
No.
Oh.
I don't know. They must be from the Drivechain video, though. The one that everyone liked.
I was just thinking, like, we'd probably have like 400 Bangladeshis watching.
That would be funny. Well, there's 400 subscribers. There's only like 0 viewers. So
there's 14 watching now. You don't even know what you're talking about. Well, one of them is me. One of them is you. One of them might be Daniel.
I closed mine, so that one's no longer double counted.
If you want, I can tell some jokes and drive them away.
Okay, yeah. Let's. How many Bitcoiners does it take to change a light bulb?
Oh man. If it's how many Bitcoiners does it take to fork a light bulb?
Well, you would have to design a new blockchain first.
Right. So everyone, I'm glad you're here. 18 people watching. I think now is the appropriate time to announce my new ICO.
Trying to catch him on that. Trying to exit scam on that reputation you've been built up to. You built up to 18. Finally, now that wasn't enough.
I like that exit scam on a reputation. That's a good one. I'm going to use that on anybody who is actually trying to build a reputation. Yeah. I'm just going to claim that they're about to exit scam on it.
Exactly. What are they planning with that reputation?
Yeah, like
what
safety.
Are they planning with that? What do they want? We should make people get like a permit for a reputation.
You're a nice guy, but what are you doing with those books next to you? You're trying to pretend like you love Stephen King reading or something like that?
No, I'm really just
look at that fucking stack of Stephen King books.
No, yeah, I'm reading 3 Stephen King books right now. I'm reading Needful Things and The Dead Zone and Duma Key.
What's this book stack? Is this just the stack of books you've read your entire life?
No, this is just what I'm reading now.
10 books. That's impressive.
Well, you know, I'm very unimpressive at all kinds of other things.
But
as far as like holding several stories in my mind at the same time, like I can do that. And in fact, I get bored if I'm not doing that. So that's why I have to read many books at the same time.
I've been reading the Gulag Archipelago, and that thing is so depressing that I have to stop every like 12 pages and read another book.
It's very depressing.
It's so sad. And then I went into and it's like, you know what it is? It's like insouciant depression. It's like I walked into the cell and they ripped out my fingernails. It's just what happened.
Right. It's like, yeah, it's like
fuck, I gotta
it's nothing you can like say to like make it kind of funny or whatever. It's just like, oh,
it sucks, bro.
Everyone was living in constant fear that they might say one thing that was marginally less obedient than 100% obedience, and so there was constant paranoia everywhere. Yeah, and then it was like that's the end of the story.
Right. It's just everyone hated each other, and a lot of us killed each other, and that really sucks. Yeah.
Friendships were ruined. Nothing valuable.
I had a friend. And I thought that he like probably ended up in the gulags. And when I got out of the gulags, he was like, "Bro, you deserve to be there, you little shithead."
Right.
It's right. It's just like, awful.
Yeah, it's just basically just a giant factory of human misery.
So I paused and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read a book that's like funny. So I started reading. I started reading like George Soros's autobiography.
What?
Oh my god!
Set you up for that joke.
Yeah, does that have a happy ending?
I don't know yet. I think that we'll see what happens with Bitcoin. He may bankrupt us yet.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, do you think he'll break the bank of Bitcoin?
I think that here's what I think. I think that what the last like rise and fall, what really bothered me about it was that the entire market was going up and down together. And that really I think that one, I have a friend here who talks about it, and I think he's correct. I think it cheapens the rise of Bitcoin that everything went up together. And I think the fact that everything fell together is a little scary. And not to be conspiratorial, but like there's literally, it's like 100% correlation. It's very fucked up.
So should we, when I make the time code link, should this be like, we should start now? We'll talk about post-maximalism or whatever.
We can do that if you don't want anyone to hear the funny.
No. I think we're going to keep it all in, but I'm going to put the link. I'm going to say real Bitcoin content starts now.
Yeah. I try to
talk about nonsense.
On my shows, I try very hard to keep the Bitcoin content down to about, maybe one.
Yeah, you do. You really do. It's very well hidden in a show that is otherwise about just totally random nonsense.
Well, that's what keeps the babes listening.
That's what keeps Mike in Space.
Mike in Space comes back for that. So
you get the surrealist developed. Okay, so like beginning now.
All right,
we're going to talk about what on earth, like the phrase Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, something like that. Which is that what distinction are people drawing between the two ideas? And really the reason for this talk is that the reason why I wanted to talk to you guys was for a couple things. I wanted to run some ideas behind you, but I also wanted to kind of ask for your opinion on how I should best proceed with my prediction markets project. But I think we could just get to that whenever it shows up organically in this thing. But why I wanted to bring all of it up is because I'm not exactly sure we got, what do we do about the Bitcoin core versus cash? Do we do nothing about it? What do we do about this atmosphere where it seems like no one cares about like the fundamentals at all? I mean, that's been going on for a while, but it just seems like it's getting worse and worse. It's gotten a little better in the last couple of weeks. But
okay, can I say something on that? I mean, I think that you need to seek out the people who are interested in the fundamentals and focus your effort on them. And you need to just differentiate who you're talking to. And somebody who is not focused on the fundamentals is not somebody worth talking to until he starts being focused on the fundamentals. And that's going to benefit yourself And hopefully once other people see that you know how to benefit yourself better than other people in Bitcoin, then they'll want to follow you.
Okay, that sounds great, but it's still not sure like what options are really on the table,
Paul,
like being too crazy.
Before we get into all that, like, look, there's a lot of noobs in Bitcoin that are going to probably stumble on this video. So can we talk a little bit about what Bitcoin maximalism is?
We should,
and discuss a little bit about actually our philosophies. I mean, we're religionists in some way, and just talk a little bit about our philosophies, how we came to them, and why we think that Bitcoin maximalism is or isn't stupid anymore. I think that would fundamentally help out those people who are kind of stumbling on this video, but also I think it provides a framework for the discussion, right?
Yep, I think that's good. Well, as you know, I sent the two of you guys the draft of this thing, and I probably put it out today or whatever, like right after this, so people can read it. But I wrote a little piece about why I believed in Bitcoin maximalism, and now why I'm sort of a little bit unsure on what the future of it is.
A little sad.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, okay, so I mean, just for those coming, Bitcoin maximalism, I'm sure you've heard it, and depending on where you heard it, it was either derogatorily stated, or it was stated with an air of like in the way that Christians declare that I love Jesus. In the same sort of way. Yes. So like, and in some senses, you're seeing here a panel, at least Paul, I don't know where Daniel necessarily stands, but I bet Daniel probably does stand here, of people that have very much defined sort of the Bitcoin maximalist movement. We've all been staunch supporters of Bitcoin itself, and harsh detractors of a lot of these altcoins. So the way that I define Bitcoin maximalism is sort of an assessment of what is maximally probabilistic. And in the early days, what that meant is that you had thousands and thousands of altcoins, none of which really panned out. They were all like just kind of sinking and in the pooper. And the only one that was really working was Bitcoin. It was the only one with like network effect. It was the only one with lots and lots of users and use. And it was the only one that really solved a real problem. The others were there as sort of a land grab.
Right, you could tell that it was like 3 or 4 years of R&D to create Bitcoin, and then someone was just like,
I did it too.
Copy paste, and then there's just, and so you just think like, how can anyone fall for that?
Well, hilariously, Blue Matt made a make your own coin generator.
Yeah, right. Which was very clever.
It was hilarious.
Speed the ruin of.
But now we're in a situation. Now we're in a situation.
I wanna mention my articles. As far as defining Bitcoin maximalism, because I wrote an article called "The Problem with Altcoins" in 2013,
it's very good.
Where I basically just made fun of the altcoins, and I called them cargo cults. And
that image of the fake Elvises or whatever is like, that's just like perfect, like, or whatever that was. That was just a perfect image.
Oh, thanks. So, but that's what it is like if you just copy the code and you don't know why you're changing anything. And and so everybody was promoting nonsensical changes to Bitcoin as if they're an investment when they're really not. And to me, like, the investment function of money is for a group of investors all to invest in one another. So the value comes from the network effect, not so much from like what mining algorithm you have or.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Or like if you could get the block time down from 10 minutes to something.
Right.
Faster.
So fundamentally, the question now is whether the landscape has changed, whether these altcoins are in fact providing something of value, or whether it matters at all. Whether we've maybe discovered that it doesn't matter whether you provide something of value. All that matters is that you have Jesus Christ Honduran at the top of your chain, and
sad thought, but we have to acknowledge it. So I broke it down in the piece that I'm about to publish. I had like sort of 3 things. One was just a clear network effect that everyone was using Bitcoin. It had by far the highest market cap, 95+%,
right,
for years and years, and it had all the transaction volume. So there's no need to like break down these weird other categories or something. It was just the clear leader, had the highest brand awareness, there was no one who was aware of an altcoin who like wasn't aware of Bitcoin. And I think it's still sort of like that, but I'm not even sure if that might be praying into the category of crypto.
Well, I will tell you this. I went to a thing this weekend in Chicago for the Athena Bitcoin launch of their trade floor. They're doing like a full Bitcoin trade floor up there, which is, or a whole cryptocurrency trade floor, which is amazing. It's kind of a neat little development in Bitcoin. It's in the heart of Chicago. It's right down the road from the CME. Very beautiful office. I was just amazed that anyone could afford this. But I mean, like, there is, I'm talking to these people, these guys who were working at the CME and the CBOE and whatnot, and all of them are asking just the dumbest questions. And it doesn't matter that, like, one guy comes up to me and he says, I heard Bitcoin can't handle more transactions than Visa. So, I mean, like, this is a fundamental discussion that's happened since the early days of Bitcoin. It goes right in line with last week. Ripple issued a press release that said it does more transactions than Visa, which is a hilarious claim, because the simple question is, why do you need more transactions than Visa, right? Visa's not like limited to 20,000 transactions a second. Visa just happens to do 20,000 transactions a second because that's what it needs. That's as much use as it gets. So in the same way, like, I'm trying to explain to people, Bitcoin has a capacity that has an enormous limit. We don't know exactly what that limit is. It might not even have a limit, but that it requires some science, it requires some fundamental code changes, and it requires work to figure out how we raise the capacity. And it requires people to actually use it, so that capacity is needed, right? So like, but people don't understand the technology, and yet the smart, what we have called smart money, is putting its dollars into places that it doesn't, one, understand, and two, that have no fundamental grounding in the science of what we're doing here.
Yeah, but I think that is sort of logical of them, because if you don't understand something, you should diversify.
Agreed.
And so they are putting their money in everything. So
often they're not, though. Often they're putting their money in like one thing. Like, they'll be like, I love this one blockchain chemistry project. And you're like, why? And fundamentally, like, I think where I get frustrated with the altcoin space in particular is in the discussion of what blockchains do, right? What do they actually do? And it's a very difficult discussion with dum-dums like the Tap Scots running around and saying that blockchains are like chicken nuggets.
I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember reading that, and I remember thinking like, oh, whatever. Like, it's kind of close enough. Like,
it's not the wrongest thing.
Exactly. Like, that's what I was thinking. I was something like, if you're going to be misled, like, this is okay.
That's the harmless way to be misled. But it's also the funniest thing that anyone's ever said about a blockchain.
But I think a red flag is that I cannot remember at all what it was that he did say. So if it were really good, I think I would have remembered it. But it's
something about putting the chicken back together and how you can't.
Oh yeah, you can't put the chicken back together. I don't even know if any of that's true though, because you
can put the chicken back together.
Like, it's not like this is against the laws of physics to reassemble a chicken, So it's like, I don't know what that was, but there you go. So, but let me just run. So, one is the network effect. Two is the fact that all the altcoins were useless, and three is the sidechains idea. And so on this, we just talked about the first one a little bit, but the second one, you could maybe say that now we've got the stuff like Monero is the most salient example of something that's not totally useless. And I brought up in the piece, that Dash did this stupid marketing budget thing, and I thought this is the dumbest thing.
And yet they're running commercials on airplanes.
Right, and yet it is somehow like working. So it's hard to totally write it off as being completely dumb. I mean, if you look at the amount of money in the marketing budget, it's like obviously absurd amounts of money, like millions and millions and millions of dollars. So I don't know if it's actually punching through in a way that we would deem to be they're efficient,
they're not effective marketers. My problem with Dash and that stuff, hilariously, is that like when you have a group voting on something like, let's say, marketing, like you still fundamentally are limited to the expertise of the people that you hire, or the expertise of the people that are like making decisions about the marketing.
But you and I, you know what I mean, is that
absolutely.
Everyone's got the Dash lanyard, they got the Dash,
right?
And it's like it's sort of working, and they are, despite having basically no advantage, like they just have the weird coin join thing that they kind of like surgically grafted into the protocol. They have basically nothing, but the marketing is like kept.
It rhymes with cash.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul, here fundamentally, like, there's a great story, and I think it's Thaler's book where he talks about England basically doing, or the UK does this thing where, you know, I guess everyone kind of has like an investment portfolio, something like that, and they did a study on how people invested, and they have like this all market index, and then they have a bunch of these like little indexes that are offered by like you know, companies that underperform that index generally, but they found that
you're saying the big index is the best.
Obviously the total stock market index, but they found that they allowed these companies to run campaigns in the first month or two that that these were like being selected, and they found that like a huge portion, an outsized portion of people were picking the marketed indices over the, you know, smart indice. And since then, since the marketing has largely died down, people are back to picking, you know, the all market indice,
the big one. Oh, that's interesting.
Right. So I mean,
people are very sensitive to they kind of have an
Hugely.
insecurity maybe about this, and they're not very confident or something. Well, you know, from your financial advisor stuff, that people really like to have a financial advisor, even though there's no evidence to suggest that they're not being totally screwed by the financial. But not only are they doing a worse job, but they're paying the financial advisor, what ends up being a huge amount of money. And so, but people prefer that. They like to have. They don't like to make the choice, and so they suffer as a result. And
well, I've eaten high off the hog making this bet with really rich people. I tell them that I bet if they'd done nothing, they would have made more money than if they had given their money to their financial advisor. And every one of them resists it and gets really, really mad at me for saying that. And then they go back and look, and a couple of times now they've come back and just devastated. So I make the bet that I'll buy them a meal at the nicest restaurant in Fort Lauderdale, or they have to buy me a meal at the nicest restaurant in Fort Lauderdale if they've lost money. And every single time I've made a bet,
they got some meals out of it, and maybe they hire you. You have to pass your series, whatever, 30 for that.
Yeah, I don't take tests.
You should actually read some of the tests are funny. Yes, please.
Can I describe what I think is going on? I think that the problems that the real world problems that Bitcoin solves are the people's fear of the collapse of the fiat money system, or they want to evade capital controls, and these are all purposes that just don't need to be supported that much. Like, they were kind of inherent in the way that Bitcoin originally worked.
It's a conspiracy hedge. Right.
But here's the thing, though, about that is that would work. The hedge would work for almost equally well for any of the cryptocurrencies.
No, that's my point.
Yeah.
And so the conflict going on in Bitcoin, or I should say, what the future, the dynamics of the Bitcoin market, or the cryptocurrency market, really have more to do with people's imagination than any other real world problem. And so it is like anything that's like a meme that can spread easily. That's a cryptocurrency, and it just doesn't matter if it's connected to reality in any way. So that's why I've been trying to do. So I imagined myself as a Stephen King monster when I made my latest video, because I think that's what affects things around here is who controls ideas, or
which things are allowed to be expressed, and in what manner. And if you're like you're blowing the Overton window.
Sure.
Way far over.
But eventually there's going to be an end to the capital flight into the cryptocurrency world, because, I don't know, either the fiat system will start working well or it'll collapse. Well, and at that point, then it's like there won't be there won't be a new influx of noobs into
Right.
this system that's like exponential anymore.
Right,
So
well,
at
it's a
that point,
classic pyramid scheme issue that you will eventually run out of suckers because you will eventually just run out of people on planet Earth.
yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, like, well, that's very true. But fundamentally, I think that like there's a lot of really cool innovations that come out of Bitcoin that are less about things like the blockchain and more about, I think, for the first time in history, we're able to ask the question as to why the monetary system looks like it looks. Right? I don't think that we've ever really stepped back for a second and done that as like a society, as a culture.
Well, yeah, I think in small scales, certainly, yes.
Right.
There's never been able, you were never able to like run an experiment where you had a country and it had two monetary systems really kind of at once, and maybe you still sort of can't, but this is an interesting the newcomer could still survive despite being
right.
smaller.
And largely, Paul, though, I think you have to I think you have to agree that like most of the monetary system has been created today as a result of sort of reactionary, like hole plugging, right? So like, oh, we had an explosion, we have to fix that. So like, you have this sort of disparate, like evolutionary, looking money that has laws and things that are associated with it for reasons that have kind of been lost to history. And with Bitcoin, I think that very quickly we learned a lot of those reasons. Why do you want banks? Well, it's really fucking hard to hold on to your own value. Right? Why do you, like, why do you have a central, management solution for money? Well, maybe like having 10,000 currencies, each having their own value isn't the most efficient system, stuff like that. Then again, like with blockchain, or cryptocurrencies generally, like a lot of that, some of those reasonings seem to have been superseded by sort of modernity, right? You have like the fucking ability to instantly exchange this coin for that coin and to basically have zero loss in the transaction other than maybe the exchange fee. So
well, I think that the reason we need a central bank is if you have a system that's complicated enough that only specialists can understand it, then they can scam everybody else by pretending that you need a central bank.
It's complicated but I think a big part of why we have the central banks is that they let this big grand scale coordination take place, and when you have these
they're the Vatican.
Wars, yeah, they are like the Vatican, really. When you have these big wars, and you need to, this is what happens. Like the society, the technological level and the media in a society are such that you can form like a giant nation, and then if everyone around you is forming a giant nation and forming a giant army, and they have the ability to tax the entire wealth of the entire nation, and then you have stuff like phones and radio, it's just easier to.
And I'm not highly.
We had an era of fiat, and I think it's just all been about, the transaction costs are cheaper with fiat than they are for gold
over short distances.
Yeah. Well, over long distances, it's even better for fiat.
Well, you're right. I didn't think you were going to say gold. I didn't listen. But yeah, like that's absolutely. My criticisms of the central bank are a little bit less. I don't have a big problem with the central bank. I think that the big issue with the central banks is that you are relying on charity. You're relying on the goodness of the government, and it works until you have, a Venezuela, or like someone who comes in and wants to like inflate the value of the currency for whatever God knows.
I know, but I don't really want to talk about this relative to. I want to talk about like what is going on in Bitcoin because, specifically, this is kind of building to me asking you guys for advice as to what I should do with my prediction markets project because. I submitted the BIP for Sidechains, but it's just been kind of idling for 2 months, and it doesn't even have the BIP number assigned. So there's really nothing I can do.
So Lucas Jr. is kind of ignoring it, isn't he?
Yeah, I think I believe he has like a bunch of family things going on at the moment, but it has been 2 months on the other hand, and so I'm not sure what is going on there. But I think at this point it's like you have to take the hint that they are ignoring it. But what's more is that in the post that I shared with you guys, I put a bunch of reasons. I post a couple things about why about that, the interest is just very, very low. Like people are just not as interested in this as they are in other things. And then I have a bunch of reasons why I think that might be.
Well, can we talk about the airplane analogy first? Because I was really interested in that. I want you to explain that.
Did you like that?
Yes.
Okay, I said something like, oh, I've heard people constantly bring up the airplane analogy, and they say there's this cartoon that, especially in the Donald Trump era, was virally memeing around the internet. And the cartoon is like, you know, you can just, like, some idiot is flying the plane and we're all going to die or something like that. So the idea is that we need to have experts in charge of Bitcoin because this is a giant plane that has everyone's wealth on it, and we need to take care of it. And so we can't do anything irresponsible with this plane. You can't start drinking on the plane because you might just crash the plane. And this is people's money that you're talking about, so you should really be very prudent when you. So that's the idea. But what I say is that it's not really like that, because you can make many copies of the plane, or you can go back in time with the blockchain. So I'm saying that the plane is actually being flown by a remote control from the ground, and you can just make an infinite number of copies of it. And that the people who are saying that they are flying the plane now for prudent reasons, they aren't actually the owner of the plane. So if the owner wants to crash the plane, they should be able to just crash it all day long and make new copies. And it's like a virtual reality world. It's not like a real plane. So I don't think the metaphor really holds up. So that's one of the things that I did mention.
What's remarkable to me about the sidechain discussion right now, by the way, is that I remember when sidechains were first proposed, they were the savior of the blockchain.
Did you see, Josh? I linked you guys. I don't know if I did it right. I linked you guys in the Scandies when you talk about how they're thermite boxes and you just laugh at them.
Yeah.
They win the vaporware award.
Yeah.
Like snuck into like a footnote or something. But
yeah, I mean, like blockchains.
Yeah, what was that?
The noobs won't remember this.
You're right. That's the story. Is that they came out? It's the best thing ever.
They had more hype than, I mean, Lightning Network, you guys think is a big deal, and it is. But like, fuck, like blockchains had more hype than Lightning Network compared to this. Everyone was waiting for sidechains. I mean, the response to everything was like, I mean, well, Bitcoin can't scale to blah, blah, blah. Well, what about sidechains? They're coming. You know, like Blockstream was formed to make sidechains work. That was the purpose of Blockstream.
Yeah, it was, which is weird. It's weird that
we've revised history and we've forgotten what the sidechain was supposed to do and how big of a deal it was. I remember when it was proposed, everyone was like, "You can do that," and right, I mean, now, like for someone like me, I'm not a technocrat. Like I don't purport to know how blockchains work. Although incidentally, being here so long, I like have picked up quite a bit.
You are like an absurdly qualified expert, which is this is a sad state of affairs.
Right.
But, I mean,
so
that's where we are.
So I can't look at code, but I can hear an idea and say, yeah, that would work on a blockchain or not. And so I understand pretty well how these things work. And I mean, at least tacitly. And I mean, like when it came out, it was an original idea. Everyone, it was the state of the network. Everybody was like, holy fuck, when sidechains come, everything changes. And then they languished. But Paul, right. You make the point in your paper, I think this is accurate. You're the only one with a working proposal and in fact an implementation of a sidechain thus far.
Right, that's true. A lot of the stuff that Blockstream went on to do, I don't want to like just end this, because we don't have anyone from Blockstream here, so I don't want to like be too critical of them because they're not here. But they have, to sort of my mild annoyance, they refer to some of their products that they sell or promote, which are the Elements project and Liquid. They refer to those as sidechains, although it is a little bit Orwellian because their side has been stripped of all of its original meaning.
Right, they're sidechains. They're sidechains that are not protected by a coherent peg. Like the Liquid sidechain is protected by, I mean, at least originally it was proposed to be a thermite box.
I think it still is. I think they just don't talk about it because
it's hilarious.
It was so the problem that they have is the same problem that George Lucas had with Star Wars Episode 1, which is that no one was afraid to criticize them. So they just, whatever stupid ideas would just bubble up in there, and then they would go out, and then you didn't have anyone laughing at them until Until Mike in Space started making all those GIFs.
Right.
That was the funniest. That was one of the funniest things that ever happened.
And Greg Maxwell has done some, like, Greg Maxwell is the he's the master. I love him, but he is the master of absurd security ideas. Like I heard one the other day that he was proposing for I think I don't remember what the box was, but basically in order to secure something on the blockchain, they were going to go buy a missile silo, fill it with cement, put a hole into the cement, and have a cord coming out of the cement. But this box would be at the very bottom of it, basically protected by tons and tons of cement, and would have tamper monitors.
Yeah, he's upgrading. I mean, see, the funny thing is that you can see there's a logic to it. Like it makes that does fulfill some requirement.
It does. It makes perfect sense when you have $400 million because you're an early adopter or something like that, right? It's like, well, we can afford this.
It's upgraded from a thermite box to like a thermite missile silo.
Right. It's hilarious.
It's just more thermite.
Don't fuck with this. We'll blow you up.
So there you go. So that's kind of the pitch of that first article, which everyone in the audience should eventually be able to read, probably later today. So I don't know, like what does it mean? Like I know Dan Krawisz and I we're not happy with. I'm not happy with the sort of anti-Hayek, anti-experimentalness of Bitcoin Core at the moment, but I'm not happy with Bitcoin Cash either because there's no standards.
Sure.
It's sort of like everyone gets participation.
Well, that's true anarchy.
It's like, oh yeah, well, so.
But that's as Hayekian as it gets. I mean, so you mentioned this in your paper, like the sort of anti-Hayek idealism of Core. Like, what do you mean by that? Because I mean, I don't think that anyone at Core would tell you they're anti-Hayek.
I know. Well, that's kind of the problem, I guess. But Hayek would say, I think, obviously he's not here, but Hayek's philosophy is very much that it's very similar to Karl Popper, and I'm a big fan of both. Which is that
he's the one that raises penguins.
Oh, sorry,
Mr. Popper's penguins.
Oh yes, right, the one and the same. And while studying penguins, Karl Popper realized that he put a big emphasis on trial and error. He said, like, well, there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand in the world. So we make incremental progress by trial and error, and there's no authority that says whether or not an idea is good. You just try something out, and then you just think that it works. Like I thought Snapchat was the dumbest idea in the world, but it just turns out it does. People like it, so there it is. And
now they're a public company.
If you want to know something about the world, you could start a business, and you could run the experiment, and you could say, well, here's my business idea. I think if you take these inputs and you transform like this, you get these outputs. So what I see in Core is actually a different type of process, one that is much more like academia in not a great way, in the bad way of.
You call it pseudo academia.
I do, because it's very authority based, really, where it's like some people have been studying the longest, so they have seniority, and then there is like kind of a formal.
Well, I thought this was actually. I thought this was very interesting, Paul. Like you discussed in your paper, the fact that peer review is supposed to be a simulation of reality, which I think is a point that I think is lost on people when they're thinking about peer review, and I think that's actually a very.
I want to go back to Popper and Hayek for a second there, because I was just sorry to interrupt, but it sometimes can take me several minutes to respond to something that happened a while ago.
Because you're high.
I have a quote from Nietzsche. And he says, to recognize untruth as a condition of life, that is certainly to impugn the traditional ideas of value in a dangerous manner, and a philosophy which ventures to do so has thereby alone placed itself beyond good and evil.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Nietzsche is really out there in a lot of ways. Sometimes like he can't understand like what he's talking about. But I think if I'm interpreting that correctly, he's saying that anyone who embraces the idea that of scientific progress, that we could do things better, they're kind of criticizing today's world and saying that there's a mistake in today's world, and that we're filled with errors. And
well,
so
okay,
you are going against everyone.
So first of all, well, I just want to say it's a bad idea to assume that any philosopher has a correct interpretation, because philosophy is inherently about talking about vague things that are not understood very well. So I don't think you have to worry about whether you interpreted that correctly.
In some ways, it's about the discussion itself is about the creation of memeing. Where you where someone throws out an idea and then you sort of solidify.
True. It doesn't really matter if Nietzsche stumbles upon something that's true and helpful,
or if it inspires you to,
or if he just says some nonsense phrase that for some reason also works.
Right.
So that is kind of
that inspires Paul Sztorc to truth. That's really all that matters.
And then it's all leading up to Trade with Dave. That's the ultimate destination.
Dave is the most coherent person in blockchain.
He's the most coherent person. He is coherence.
He's extreme. He is coherence itself.
Anyway, what were you saying? Did you have a comment about Dan Krawisz?
Oh, just that we should all be Nietzscheans. And I think that Popper and Hayek are just like they're like people who could adopt Nietzschean ideas and still act normal and be like normal people rather than like a crazy person like Nietzsche.
Yeah, I think there's maybe something to go for that, where it's sort of like Nietzsche is sort of just like God is dead and therefore good luck making your own meaning or something. But I think Hayek and Popper kind of like they found a way to kind of make a little bit of meaning, so they're relatively a little bit more sane, whereas Nietzsche was kind of just like, good luck to all of you.
Yeah, I actually think Nietzsche was deliberately acting insane, but he was actually less crazy than he appears.
This syphilis, it is pretend.
And the reason I think that is because that's what I do in my videos sometimes on Bitcoin stuff, because I know that that's a way to get through to cult members.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we can only imagine what it would have been like for him in whatever, the 1800s. That would have been a lot more difficult. He didn't have the internet. Couldn't like meet people.
Paul, I think that you have I have a question for you about that. I mean, I think you have some fundamental sort of conflicts of interest in all of this, and I think we should at least clear them up. So number one, Roger Ver invested in HiveMind. Correct.
That is, I think it is I acknowledge it as a conflict of interest.
I know you do because you're honest. So, I mean, Roger Ver, so one of your fundamental questions is whether you should sort of adopt the Bitcoin Cash ethos, right? And not necessarily ethos, but like that you should maybe petition them to add Drivechain, right?
Well, actually, that I would help anyone who wanted to add Drivechain to anything. So that's actually not where I thought you would go with that. I think. Well, let me just pitch this for like 5 seconds and then get back to what you were saying. So I thought you were going to say that the only reason that the fusion idea, which we haven't talked about yet, I think the only reason that I kind of threw that out was because maybe of the conflict of interest, and that is just sort of an idea about patching things up later. But I guess we'll talk about that when we get to it, I guess.
Well, I couldn't have gone there because that's an intelligent point.
Oh, I have something to say about Bitcoin Cash.
Oh, no.
Really quick.
We're fracturing off though. Wait, so it's splintering out, and it's going to look like I'm evading the question of the conflict of interest. So I think instead I want to answer it first. So,
sorry.
I think it was you were saying that that's the only reason why I would care about Bitcoin Cash. I think that could be a reason. I think it's a little bit more practical than that, though. I think it would be better if, like we do, I mentioned in the piece that we have bitcoin.org and bitcoin.com pointing now to different projects.
Right.
And I think that it would just be more efficient overall if we could somehow, I mean, I have been trying to smooth over the conflict kind of for years now. So it's hard to say. But yeah, I think there definitely is a conflict. There is a conflict of interest. I don't know. I think at this point, everyone has got a conflict of interest. I think it's just like,
so a
few people
of course,
took Dan Krawisz's advice and kept both coins, or
of course,
mostly kept both coins. So
I mean, I think that you just need to acknowledge that everybody is out to get rich on some level, and it's all a big poker game.
I would prefer if no one trusted anyone. So I think it's good if people don't trust me. It's an ad hominem fallacy, right? It should just some idea should just be a better idea. But yeah, I think that's good for you. Totally good, fair game, and helpful for you to point that out. Now, did we lose Dan Krawisz's point? point?
No, I wanted to respond to Bitcoin Cash because what you said you think everybody gets a participation trophy, but what I think is what's happening is that a new hierarchy is forming, and it's just open now. And if you were to get in there and start acting important, that you could be on the top of the Bitcoin Cash hierarchy.
I think you're probably right about that. That thought hadn't occurred to me until now, but I think
no, that's a Peter Reason objective, I think.
Oh, Ryzen, you mean?
Whatever you call him, that dude.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I'm not sure because he had been doing that definitely for Bitcoin Unlimited.
But nobody likes him anywhere else.
What was I going to say? So you asked about doing Drivechain on Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
The issue is I've actually looked at that, but because it's not really anything specific to Bitcoin Cash, other than I assumed it would be easy because the code is similar, but the code is actually not similar. So this is something I talked about when I was on Chris's show, that we tried to see how similar it still was, and if you could just merge it back in, but they do change a lot of things. They decided to change a lot of things in Bitcoin Cash, and unfortunately, I think there is a well-known effect where programmers like to just refactor stuff organize stuff the way they want it organized, and this is a little bit objectively helpful, but what's really worse is that there's a bad sort of nefarious reason, possibly subconscious.
It makes things not plug and play.
Yeah, it sort of makes it so that you need the developer who worked on it in order to understand it. So it is actually a way of like owning the project in a way, which I don't think is consciously a motive for people, but people just think, oh, I'm helping and get involved. And then I don't think people realize like how difficult it is to read code. There is a joke about it being easier to just write the code the second time than read what someone else wrote in the code. So
no, that's true.
Yeah. So there you are. So I think unfortunately the code base is different. People like laugh at me. They try to like say that this isn't true or something, but I have investigated it, and the code is they will change all these like irrelevant things like in comments too. They change these variable names, because for political reasons. It's
right, of course.
Petty, right.
So Paul, another thing, and I think that it's not so much a conflict of interest, but there's a potential that you come off as like a whiny little bitch because Hive Mind requires sidechains, right? And
correct.
Or Drivechain specifically is I think how you've built it. So so now people are going to the potential criticism is that the only reason you want Drivechain is so that you can make your Hive Mind money.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. The only occult member would say that, because the whole point of that question is to manipulate somebody into trying to say that they're not a whiny little bitch. You have to answer that question by
acknowledging that you're a whiny little bitch.
Being a whiny bitch, or by pretending it's a stupid question. Well, it is.
Well, I think Josh kind of, he was saying he kind of acknowledged that it was a stupid question.
Of course,
I kind of thought, but I think it's fine. It is fair to say the project does need something that I call categorical control, for lack of a better phrase, and that no one understands. Like I think, but that's fine because it shouldn't really make much of a difference. And I would say probably the primary motivation for working on sidechains is because I need them for my other project. So that I think is correct, and I think I've even said as much that I was waiting for Blockstream to finish sidechains for years, so I could put my own project on as a sidechain, and they didn't do it, and so then I worked on it. So that's the story that I've given people for years. So I think that that is the number one reason, but I think human beings are complicated, and we have lots of motivations, and I have a lot of reasons, and some of the other reasons are that I think it really is the best. It really is the best thing for the community right now, because you see that we do have this rise of altcoins, that people don't seem to be interested in them for their properties other than how much attention they can attract. So, and we do see that people want to try new technical things, which is exactly what sidechains are for. So
by the way, as a sidebar, Paul,
perfect.
One of my favorite moments in Bitcoin was you at doing a speech. Where was it? At Scaling Bitcoin, the second one, I think.
maybe a first or the third. The second one was not really recorded.
Third. It was in like Hong Kong or Tokyo or something, and you were
Milan is the third one.
you were there doing the speech, and like you went over.
Oh, that's the first one. And what was that guy? Yeah, the MC was trying to shout,
"Get off the fucking stage!" Which is funny because that was right in the middle of me being like, Paul, you write so fucking much. Your articles are too goddamn long. Yeah. So then all of a sudden, like, he's on stage and he just can't get off because fucking long. Anyhow,
I want to apologize for I should have let Paul answer the last question before I said what I thought of it. So that was definitely a bad interruption.
Daniel,
there.
you're so reasonable.
Like, he's like the lawyer, you know. It's like objecting to the question, you know. He's like, yeah, he's the cult lawyer. He gets to decide, which is itself a cult, which is maximum irony, which is perfect. Yeah. He gets to decide. He's the only one who gets to decide for all of us what is or is not a cult question. So
I have very strong feelings about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think it's totally fair. But I mean, I think that it is my primary motivation. But that doesn't mean that it's not I have also argued that it's the only real solution to the scaling debate, which I think a lot of people find surprising because they're like, that's such an outrageous claim. But I think the logic is very simple, which is that it's not really about the transactions per second throughput. It is really about how expensive it should be to run a node. And I've explained this a couple times, which is that even if we could do a billion transactions per second, or maybe not, that's, you know, obviously at infinity, they kind of equal out. But, you know, if we could do like 1 million transactions per second, you could still have someone like Roger Ver show up and say, well, why don't we do, you know, 20 million transactions a second? Because 20 million is bigger than 1 million, and that bigger is better, is more stuff, more value created for people. And you could still have, even if we're currently doing 1 million transactions per second, you could still have Luke Jr. say, we need to cut it back down to 350,000 a second. Right? So it's really about the cost of running the full node. And so you need something that is like client-side validation, which is the sidechains are in that category where people just opt in, they decide, okay, I want to be on the hook for this.
Paul, I
think it's the only thing that can actually resolve the conflict. And
I think in your paper, and I think you're touching on it now, I think you miss another reason why someone might oppose sidechains. And I think fundamentally sidechains as a concept literally answer the question, what is Bitcoin? And I think it's a really scary possibility because you could see, I mean, like in some ways, and on Bitcoin, you have like this sort of attack vector of the 51% attack. With sidechains, you introduce sort of a 51% attack currency vector where like if a majority of people jump out of Bitcoin Core and move to the Bitcoin Cash sidechain, you have essentially ceded control of the Bitcoin project to this other sidechain, right? Like Luke Dash Jr., for example.
I'm not totally, I kind of understand what you're saying, but think about, like, does it really mean that you've ceded control? Like, I think it's just, it's not quite like a black and white thing, right? It's just you only have control over the users who want to use your project, right? So,
except that, I mean, like Luke Dash Jr. has stated before that he thinks the best use of sidechains is in upgrading the network, where you basically upgrade the network on a sidechain, and then people can kind of move over to that upgraded network whenever they please.
Yeah.
So, well, sure. I mean, I think that it's absurd to imagine that some group of people should have control in the first place. It really should be about doing, you know, anybody should do whatever they know will make the network more valuable.
It is kind of like controlling the English language, the APA and these other places. And it's common for older people to complain about slang that's being used by younger generations. And then the APA people will try to have all these, you know, style guides or these appropriate grammar rules and things, but in reality, the English language is just does whatever it wants to do. And new words just appear, stuff like Kafka-esque or something that are just people, and we have the words they have a life of their own, and and so it's like cede. What if someone said like you're going to cede control of the English language to people who are using AOL Instant Messenger? You see what I mean? Like that's kind of how I would translate that, because it's
I
like,
think that's
yeah,
a reasonable point. Except that in this case, I mean, like, you don't have core developers in language, right? Like, you don't have people that are like, you have linguists, but linguists analyze language. They don't make language, right? In this case, you actually have people making this thing. So you do have a sort of centralized control of the project via, you know, these programmers. And
but that's kind of the problem. That should be a problem that we need to solve.
I don't know how you necessarily get around that, though.
I think that is kind of the point of the sidechains, though, which is that if you want to go with a different team, you spin this thing up and then you're over there with them. Or if you want to, even if you want to make a team of one and you want to be the only developer on your project, you sort of could with sidechains. It's not completely as this permissionless innovation 100%, but it's obviously right now it's 0%. If you want to do something that's a hard fork, you have to leave the project and go somewhere else.
And another thing I think that you have to resolve with your thesis is this. I think that the thesis that sidechains are better for altcoins, or that they would have prevented the altcoin crisis, I think it belies the fact that altcoin makers are here to get rich. They weren't here.
I think you're right. I think you and I have talked about this before, that like just we really underestimated the sheer
greed
energy behind this scamming, right? You know, it's like wow, like there's nothing that they won't do, and there's nothing that people won't fall for.
Like, I don't think Dash would have ever done a sidechain, because I think that, like, Evan wanted to make a lot of money on Dash.
Yeah, well, what I say, the speech I usually give is that it would remove the pretext. So if there was this history of sidechains existing,
you could argue it in court that they were definitely scamming, because they could have just used,
because you would, and even if it were just the court of public opinion, you could say, well,
why didn't you use a sidechain?
Yeah, like and they're like, and then they'll say, oh, because we want to do all this great dark sand technology, and it's like, oh, but can't you already do that? And then and I think there is a little bit of that is a good argument, or it's a good position to take, because people very often do use pretexts to do almost everything complicated that involves groups. So it's a big. Right. That's a thing that people do, and they're very good at it, and they will use pretexts for things. So I do
think it's dangerous to argue for sidechain from the point of removing pretext, because, like, if you remove one pretext, you're simply going to have people invent a new pretext.
I know I agree with you. I think. I mean, eventually you will remove them all, and then there won't be any. But
I mean, that's the hope. Forever, but like, it's not code. Like, you can't remove all pretexts. You just need a good salesman in there to, like, develop a new one.
Yeah,
what about when you're put up against a wall and going to get shot? Then you need an altcoin.
Right.
Like,
so why is that? Let me talk about altcoin scams, though, because I would say that if an investment product doesn't make any sense and it still goes up in value, you need to blame the victims, and the only way to teach people to do something that that will make more sense is for the market to correct them. If they don't want to think ahead, then the only thing that will change their behavior is corrections from the market. And right now, there are no corrections from the market, because, as we agreed earlier, the point that the purpose that Bitcoin serves now doesn't really depend on whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's an altcoin.
Yeah, that is something else that might change if there was one dominant coin that had sidechains that was like future-proof. Kind of, because then people would say, oh, this is really the only one that's going to serve that purpose. These other ones are just weird science projects or just giant scams. So it still is possible. But Josh, your argument was sort of something along the lines of like sidechains wouldn't get a lot of support because people would still be supporting the scams. And
well,
that's
scams,
probably true.
Yeah, the scams wouldn't have used. I mean, they're still scams. Like, they're run by scammers. These aren't charitable people who are like, what is the best way for me to implement this wonderful science,
the most efficient, the most technically efficient.
They're sitting there. They're like, how can I extract most money from these believers? And they've done a really effective job at it, because like,
and they're getting better. It's getting worse and worse. Like, they're just more and more organized.
That's because there's more and more money here. Yeah. Like what do you do when Wall Street shows up? Like, I was talking to a hedge fund a few months ago, And I was asking them what they were investing in, and they said that there's a few things that we think are scams, we're putting a little bit in. There's a few things that we don't think are scams, we're putting a little bit in. And then there's things that we're long on. And I was like, well, what are you long on? And they were like, well, there's this one project that we really like. It's a sneaker provenance blockchain.
Yeah, great.
And I was like, did you know that sneaker provenance blockchain, it was the medical device to your home over what do you call it?
Internet of Things?
No, not Internet of Things. It was those flying thingies. What do you call it? Drones. They're going to drop drones, like Tylenol drones off at your house. And like
on blockchain?
Well, it was on blockchain. They put the blockchain, they put the signature in the window so that I could talk to the window and come directly into your home. And what's funny about that project, it was a remake of a project that a few months earlier had proposed a blockchain and raised money for sneaker provenance. So like they didn't know that history. I knew that history, and it's hilarious. And they're long on that project. And I'm like, none of that is a blockchain. That's not a blockchain. Like putting a blockchain in your window is not an idea. So like there's so much money, so much money coming here. And like, you're right. The smart thing to do if you're smart money is to index your stupidity. But like, that's not what's going on. Like there's a bunch of investors here. The smart money is putting their money into like full on Ponzi schemes, just full on Ponzi schemes.
Well, I got the project, prediction markets could be used. You could sort of bet that the project would collapse and then kind of pop the bubble, like blow up the self-fulfilling prophecy in reverse. So prediction markets are kind of an antidote to the incompetence.
I think I've changed my mind on prediction markets, Paul, and for reasons that I don't think I could have foreseen.
What was your original mind?
Well, my original big problem with prediction markets is that they do not have liquidity.
Oh, there's a thing for that though in my project. There's a little formula for that. Automated market maker that Robin Hanson invented.
Granted, okay, but that said, I think that in a market
costs money though, no free lunch, of course.
Right, but I think that with regard to like the liquidity problem, I think that in some ways the ICO market is proving to me that the liquidity
even anything can have liquidity.
Well, not just that, the liquidity crisis that that befalls these like prediction markets, with something like a permissionless blockchain can actually possibly be overcome.
Oh yeah, I think you're right because we would wonder like why did InTrade why was the liquidity so low? And you could say because no one was interested, or you could say because it was just too annoying.
It was just really fucking hard.
And I think you're right that that's another point in favor of my project.
And I think additionally, I think there's another issue, which is that InTrade in most prediction markets. I mean, I hate to say this, but prediction markets are essentially an American invention. This is where they're tried. This is where they've really kind of flourished.
It's like UK a little bit now.
There's been a little bit, but like I don't understand. Like I think a prediction market is probably somewhat of a zero-sum game. Particularly in the sense that like if they're on a blockchain, I think you don't want like multiple markets for will Hillary Clinton become president. I think you want maximum liquidity in one market for that to be true. And I think that in that sense it might be that a prediction market does in fact need to be on a blockchain. And I don't know that it regresses. Like I mean, maybe it regresses to an assassination market, but I don't think it does.
A giant thing about that. You don't. Everyone keeps bringing that up. I wrote a giant thing about that, put it on the front page.
Well, I think the assassination market thing is exactly the same thing as a liquidity problem. I think that very few people would bet on assassination markets.
Right. First of all, it's a free rider problem. Right. So it's like everyone would be hoping that no one else plays. But the other thing is that you can, with the conditional markets that I advocate, which are actually even cheaper than not like doing it in separate markets. You can make money if you're right about the person being wrong for the jobs. You can say, well, this president is not as good as the other president that I would have liked, but at least I'm making money hand over fist as they drive up the unemployment rate and ruin the country. So
Paul, let me adjust.
Profit off of being right, and then they can profit off of being right and having the person be fired and replaced with someone else. So it's even better. you know, instead of paying to get rid of someone, you make money by getting rid of them, and no one dies. So it's like people still gonna keep bringing up that.
What do you do? What do you do when like what do you do when like Jeff Bezos being fired is not a real thing, but the prediction market, the guy, like someone has driven it up to like you know, they're gonna make $1 million.
They would just lose money because they're ultimately.
But they're on the board. They're on the board of Amazon. They're like, look, Jeff, the prediction market says that you got to be fired. I have to do it.
That's what I'm hoping. Don't you understand? That's the vision. That's the vision. Is that it says, here's the stock price.
Want that to happen. That'd be great.
Yeah,
exactly, because right now the CEO does not compete the same way that like a janitor competes or a waitress competes or something like that, where they're being scrutinized and they can be fired if they underperform. The CEO is only held in check by the board of directors, which is held in check by the shareholders. But the shareholders are not, they have to like do things like vote, which they mostly don't do. And the board of directors is, as a result, mostly the CEO's friends. And it's no good. It's the exact same problem of the president of the United States, just slightly smaller. But so the vision is for both the president of the United States and the CEO
to be subject to
exactly to be say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, we like you, but the stock price will go up by 4 cents if we replace you with this other guy. So we have to do it because we have a fiduciary duty. And yeah, well, like, I mean, people complain about like CEO bonus pay and all this other stuff. It's like now there's nothing you can do about it if they do something like that. But with this, it's like they can only if they're worth the salary. So it's just free markets kind of all around, especially for CEO, whereas today they kind of have almost a little bit of an out on the CEO.
I want to address real quick a point that someone is making in the chat here. Jal Turi says that smart money being dumb is not using the term smart money properly. I can't stand when people call me out for being an idiot. Although they're right. But no, Jal, that's not what I said. I didn't say that smart money is being dumb. I guess I did, but I'm not saying that that's unprecedented. I'm just saying that that's the state of nature right now, that in fact, smart money is being dumb. And
they're intertwined. You know, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're saying that with this talk about network effects, and I bring up the QWERTY keyboard and Esperanto in the paper, which
and
is
Dvorak.
Like, yeah, and exactly. So it's like what? So it's kind of like you know, you're stuck with whatever the dumbest people believe after a certain point.
Right, and that's actually the bet that the smart money's making, is that the dumb people who are
right
doing this
will outweigh them or something. So
right, and that's
exactly what's going on. Yes,
and I think it's yet to be seen what's going to happen, because like the thing is this: what really bothers me about the state of nature as it is right now is that there's a lot of things out there that these blockchains that are making, the people that are releasing these blockchains, the people that like Jeremy Gardner and such are promoting, like they're advocating things that blockchains simply don't do. They just don't. So then the question is, what's gonna be left when all of the sulfur burns shit away?
Anti-Hayek thing. You know, I agree with you. I mean, who are we kidding here? Like, these people they have no idea what they're doing. They can't find a coconut on coconut.
Yeah, but my point is, Paul, to think that nobody understands Bitcoin and everybody is just kind of bullshitting about it.
My point,
we should let people try their dumb blockchain project.
Of course, but my point, Paul, isn't that they shouldn't be able to do that. My point is that like they're doing things that blockchains themselves do not do. So and
it affects us,
right? So the question is that the thing that a blockchain does, which essentially is, you know, the transfer of this thing in a ledger to this place, like from this place to this place. That's essentially,
you would say, message ordering or something.
Right, message ordering.
Without anyone being in charge or something.
That's really all it does. So the question is whether the things that you're appending to the activity of a blockchain are enough to make people move over. And when all is said and done, when you go before Jesus Christ himself and he burns away all of your deeds, and you look at what's left, does it in the end did these like extra features, these extra blockchain features, these things that really are not endemic to a blockchain, did they matter? Were they enough to kind of pull away the network effect from the thing that is sort of the pure blockchain? And I've always thought that that's not going to happen. I always thought that the best thing to do is to bet on the efficient blockchain, the thing that is sort of the purest.
Exactly. Right. You would think that's what you would think, but that's what I suggest. Like, and I say, as I say in the piece, and I say today, it's like I think it's still far and above the best bet. Bitcoin maximalism is still like, I still consider myself to be an adherent to the religion, so to speak. But it's
well, again, it's about what's probabilistic, which is what blockchains are all about.
You might be betting on Esperanto, which is horrible to conceive of, but
which Vitalik
we live in a world where we have the QWERTY keyboard, and we have Vitalik, and we have all this other stuff, right? We have all this nonsense, but the English language is very, very inefficient to learn and speak and write.
Or betting. I mean, like betting on Windows when like Mac comes
Windows,
along, right?
exactly.
Like
right,
this is that's. I mean, I think it's an important question that quote unquote maximalists have to deal with. But again, maximalism, in my opinion, has always been about what is most likely. And in the way that blockchains transactions don't actually settle, you're the probabilistic owner of these coins to a degree. In that same way, what the question that maximalism asks is which blockchain is most probabilistically going to be the victor.
I don't think that's fundamental, because I think everything's probabilistic.
I think that it's more it's math. Like in blockchain, it's quantifiable. I don't think that all things are quantifiably probabilistic.
I think you may be right about that. But I mean, couldn't I quantify, like if I went to Bank of America down the street and then
how likely you are to survive that trip?
I don't know, like or they would just like they would forget about my deposit or something.
Yeah, base rates matter, my friend.
Yeah. I don't know.
But so yeah, back to the point.
Yes.
So yeah, these papers are interesting. I mean, like I would like to talk a little bit about sort of where like the questions you have about sidechains. What are your options now that like it seems like Core is kind of ignoring your proposal?
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about. Like, I mean, there are a couple options. Like one is just the user-activated soft fork, but I don't know about that one. That seems kind of that's heavy-handed, sort of. And the other one is you could just do a hard fork, kind of like Bitcoin Cash did. Also bad in a way, but I would do it. I think I would do it a lot better than they did it. Where I would have no replay protection, and I would maybe even do some fancy tricks where I could add large block sidechain to it. But you see, there's almost too many options that it becomes like very difficult. They all get tangled with each other very quickly.
Do you say no replay protection in order to force exchanges? In order to force exchanges to basically launch it?
I do that to prevent a veto from these other people like Brian Armstrong. If they decline to list the coin on their exchange, it doesn't matter because it's already listed because they hold it.
Yeah, well, the advantage of no replay protection is that you can continue to index. You stay in the Bitcoin index fund even as you
after the fact, right?
Change you spend coins.
Yeah. So I would do it a little differently. I would probably. I mean, I will. So like that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about. Like, what do you think? Like would be the best thing? But there are a couple ideas. One would be to try not to compete. They kind of vary on how cooperative versus competitive they are. But I think a very competitive one would be to hard fork away and add not only Hivemind as a sidechain, but add a large block sidechain to try and get both groups, and maybe change the proof of work algorithm to try and get the Luke Jr. group, and maybe also ensure that the host blockchain is smaller, is to also get the Luke Jr. type small block group, and then make the large block even bigger to try and get the cash group.
But you also advocate in your paper only if you're going to change POW to only make that the only change in that, in that fork, right?
Exactly. That's another thing I would thank you for bringing that up, because I
read it, Paul. I know that you don't think I can read, but I did read it. It was very fucking long.
I know, yeah. People are like, how can you write so long about that?
Holy shit.
But one design advantage would be to keep the code bases very, very, very similar to someone else's, so that you can just keep copying stuff in, even if you don't agree with it or if you think it's crazy. So And the Bitcoin core code base is very, very, very high quality. And according to me,
in some ways, right? In some ways, what's fucked up about hard forks, and this is I think like the reality is that like hard forks are a little bit like the creation of bills in Congress, and you have this weird political process where everyone wants to sort of attach their riders to the hard fork.
Yes,
and I think that can be really fucking dangerous.
Absolutely right, and we saw it happen with Ethereum Classic, which could have been a great project, but it was immediately sunk with the riders, I thought. And I also thought that I also think the Bitcoin Cash also the same thing, where they said it's all because those guys don't know what they're talking about. See, that's a perfect metaphor for it, really, because if you think that there is a mistake in the existing work, you should only change that one mistake.
But you can't, because you have to have you do the math in terms of like, I mean, you did the math in terms of who you might want to bring aboard. So like you say, what Litecoin, Ethereum, et cetera, make up like what 51% or something like that of the users.
Yeah, the depressing thing is that that Ethereum is such a large portion that if you wanted to cross like a 50% or 60% threshold, you would only need that. But Ethereum is a ridiculous project. So, but this is for the fusion idea.
Sure, but I'm just saying, like for something like a UASF or something, you're talking political factionism. Like you absolutely are right. Well,
the thing is, in one sense, it would be an easy win, because if you did UASF and you forced the split, there would be two networks that would be exactly the same. One would have sidechain option, and the other would not. And so you'd think that you would win, but it's like obviously it's a risk, and it's
Luca Perchik is asking why not federated pegs?
Well, see, they're not really because that's not really anything. This goes
to the structure of what Drivechain is, because Drivechain fundamentally, I mean, the entire point of Drivechain is that it's really, really difficult to get out of the sidechain for security reasons.
Correct.
But and that's fundamentally solved essentially by market exchanges. You could have like you're going to want someone like Poloniex
that's faster. That doesn't need to be pegged, because it will be pegged by just the market.
Right, and through arbitrage. So like you have this like that's essentially the federated peg is a different mechanism, and I like federated pegs. I like federated sort of models. I think a great example of that is Counterparty, where they have a federated server model, but they're fundamentally less secure.
Right. So they are. It's kind of a contradiction in terms. The phrase federated.
Perchit.
It's kind of a. It's kind of just an oxymoron. Like it's not. That's the opposite. That's the whole point of the blocks, is that there is no group. See, what's great about a blockchain is it recovers from mistakes without anyone doing anything. So it recovers from error.
A federated peg is not like a protocol solution. It's a solution by like a small group of voters, and like there's a lot of problems with them. You can do things like DDoS the peg itself. I mean, there's a lot of security concerns, but also like
think about it, when it gets to a really big scale.
It's
like if it has millions and millions of dollars, and it's just a couple people, and
or hundreds of thousands of users, right?
People plant drugs on those people, or they all collude and just take it all. It's like it's not what we came to Bitcoin for. We came to Bitcoin to get away from that. The Satoshi's invention, mining, is
what I like about Drivechain. But Paul, Drivechain does have some of the same problems as something like a Lightning Network, right? Like for example, with Lightning Network, someone can steal money out of a channel, right? So the solution to Lightning Network is watchtowers.
Well, they have a couple things where they make it efficient to backstab the person.
They lose their money, they lose their bonds.
They can pay a high transaction fee with that. Yes. So a long opportunity to sound the alarm, and a reward if someone sounds the alarm.
Which sounds very familiar, because I think that they stole that right out of the Drivechain idea. I think fundamentally. I think they did. I think that is literally derived from the Drive. I mean, it's what open source is. It's to iterate on ideas. And I think the fact that you had this time mechanism, it functions exactly the same as the time mechanism in Drivechain.
Well, it's in TruthCoin as well. I do the same thing where I say we don't resolve any of the questions for a really long time, and then there's a reward if someone backstabs the truth and someone backstabs that person,
they lose their bonds.
The second person gets the most money out of the honest people get more money, but it's the first person who backstabbed the truth is the biggest loser. So there's an incentive to backstab, to double cross the double crosser or what have you. So, but I think I'm not sure. I just think that's just a good idea.
Well, I think that's a good idea as well. But like, so I mean, let's say that there is an entire watchtower sort of mechanism that's built up as a result of Lightning Network, which I think there actually will be, because I think Lightning Network is kind of a cool tech. I mean, couldn't you just take the same watchtowers that are watching Lightning Network and basically co-opt them to do the same thing with Drivechain pegs?
No, it's very easy with Drivechain. It's a little easier to watch, and you watch for the entire chain, so you can kind of free ride a little bit. Other people's watching, but it is a little different because, well, they're similar and different. I don't know if we want to go into a big.
I have some advice, because I think we got off the topic of advice.
Yes,
so
maybe we did. Yeah, I think so.
I think the most important thing to do is what you're already doing, which is to be willing to help anybody who does want to turn on Drivechains, no matter who they are, and that maximizes the competition to people who are not listening to you.
That probably does put a lot of pressure on the current developers too for Bitcoin. That's pretty good. Well,
yeah. Well, competition is best for the consumer. It's not good for the producer.
Have you sought out? I mean, is there a fundamental reason why Drivechain couldn't be implemented on something like Monero?
Well,
no, don't seek them out unless you invest in Monero first.
Prediction markets.
Yeah. There's no fundamental reason. It's just like, you know how it is. You write the code for one thing, and it's just easier to just not write it again. But yeah, I think you're right. That would be kind of, that hadn't really crossed my mind, but that would be funny because Monero is very different. Monero is written from scratch versus Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Feathercoin. Those are all forks of each other.
Mimblewimble.
So very, 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 very similar. Mimblewimble is also from scratch, I think, right?
I believe so. Yeah. What are they? Glee or whatever they're Grin,
yes.
That one really bothers me more than anything. Is that like?
Isn't that shocking? I put that in the paper that even that is going to be an altcoin.
Well, I heard that from Jay in New York, the Bit Devs, the guy who runs Bit Devs up there, and he was talking about Grin, and like I think Mimblewimble's a really cool project, but like I thought we were implementing that into Bitcoin. So like now it seems to me that like even a lot of the core developers have themselves sort of ceded this position that like altcoins are not only legitimate, but that like, they're more than just testnet scams. Well, it seems ideologically misaligned with the project.
I know. I don't know what to think about it. I mean, I think that is the ultimate, like, that's the only reason it's not being criticized by the core developers, in my opinion, is that it's developed by a core developer or a developer of core. So, like, I mean, it's kind of weird, right? It's like not a principled discussion anymore because when they do it, it's okay.
And there's Zcash, which was a similar thing where like the core was pretty silent on Zcash because a lot of people that had contributed to core were also contributing to Zcash, despite that. But there was a little bit more criticism of Zcash and like Grin. Everyone seems to be like, and it really scares me to see core all in on Grin, like to see people in core being like, yeah, I'm going to put lots of money into that. And people are really excited about a project because they're fundamentally like, I like the idea of Mimblewimble. I don't know how it works technically, but I like the idea of it. I like a privacy feature. I like privacy coins. I like the idea that you have like a little bit like more fungibility in something. I think that's what we need in Bitcoin. I thought that's what Greg Maxwell was working on. And it really scares me to see people who have been like staunch core supporters being like, yeah, I absolutely love this project. It's great. I'm going to invest in it. That's very scary. So, I mean, like, I think Daniel's advice, I mean, I think that's good, really good advice. Cause I think that core needs a little pressure right now. Not just for your project, but for like generally just acting good.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, like what is I'm not sure what to make of it, because when you see something like that with Mimblewimble, then it's like, oh, okay. It kind of suggests a lot of different things, that if something is a really good idea, if they think of something really great, they will abandon Bitcoin for it.
That's fundamentally what I think is a little bit scary, is that if they're willing to kind of like, I mean, if you know, Adam Back has all of his money in Bitcoin and then 30% of it goes into Grin. I mean, suddenly that's a security risk in some ways. Like it's kind
of a conflict of interest.
That's Bill Clinton fucking a Russian spy, you know, like it's a little bit like, well, like now we're susceptible. Like why wouldn't he leave the project? If this other project is extremely is something that catches his interest. There's no loyalty.
This brings me to Daniel's point about my second piece of advice is that you should do a fork without replay protection, because that is an attempt to take over control, and if they don't want control, you should be able to take over. Then you'd be in charge of the core chain, which would
Daniel,
be great.
Do you want Paul in charge of the chain?
Yes.
Yeah. The clever thing is, it's actually a demonstration that I wouldn't be in charge of the chain, because what it would actually demonstrate is that it's up for grabs. If your ideas aren't as good, then someone can just show up and take.
Well, your ideas are good. Over. Just you would be in charge, okay?
No, but see, that's the point. I wouldn't be in charge if I had bad ideas. If I did Star Wars Episode 2, then they'd come right in, and someone else would iterate again, and it would be too
fundamentally
that would be perfect.
I think you run a big risk by doing that, though, because like if you fail, that's kind of the end of your project.
Yeah, no, it is not, because he can continue to be open-minded about helping anybody who wants to implement it.
It is a little of both. It's like in one sense, of course, it's not the end
with the POC of failure.
Anything again, but it's kind of just like, oh, like it is like why they don't run the same candidate for election like after they lose. It's just like,
okay, so let me give my third piece of advice. Don't think about how to win. Think about what will maximize the value of your chain at the moment it starts running.
Sorry, at the moment it starts running. Yeah, that's right. That's a critical moment. So that's going to be difficult.
Daniel's full of like real advice.
I had this in the thing where I said I would want to delay the announcement for a while to give everyone a chance to like warm up to it and decide how they feel about it, because I think if it's too quick, there's a sense in which you would inspire some panic. But yeah, I think that's a very good principle.
Paul,
it's supposed to be hard. Let's see, we have to go back on something. It's like we are talking about hard fork of Bitcoin Core only, I think. But we did talk about in the Twitter chat right before this, we were talking about this, something about the fusion idea, or
that's what I wanted to mention was, can we talk about how you're discussing implementing? Because I think that fundamentally it's a very difficult thing to fathom, sort of the overtaking of or the enticement of like a group of people to your project, right?
Exactly.
And I think the fusion idea is an interesting one. It's fundamentally against most of what you stand for. But,
I know it's weird. It's very weird, and I worry
that it's possible. Essentially, what you're saying is, well, it's possible, so it should be done, which I think is a weirdly reasonable point.
No, like it may be done. I say it's likely to be done.
But someone. It might as well be done. And I find that to be, but I do have some issues with it. And let's talk a little bit about the fusion idea, and let me bring up sort of my thoughts on it, because we talked.
First, let me introduce what it basically is. It's adding a sidechain basically via a hard fork instead of a soft fork. So you soft fork the sidechain in, but you hard fork and you generate a bunch of cash out of thin air to deposit into the sidechain such that you've made everyone whole over there.
And by cash, you mean Bitcoin.
I mean Bitcoin.
You would have
cryptocurrency.
But the advocacy essentially is to have more than 21 million Bitcoins.
Right. So that's the first FAQ question, of course, is about like how insane is that? But I bring up some points as to why it may not be totally a non-starter, because in particular, if you fuse core and cash, most people have not split their coins. actually. So for those people, it's just like switching from dollars to cents, and they don't actually get any inflation tax. But in general, it's just like any compromise would be inferior to you competing and winning. So that's just kind of the nature of what it is. But yeah, that's the basic idea is you leave all the networks relatively the same, and you try to replay. There's no mandatory replay protection on any of them, and you try to replay transactions on all of them. You try to copy the code from all their development teams.
So basically, the proposal is
everyone's work.
You fork every single coin, and you assign them all a peg. And
to a new thing that you've also forked. So you fork like Bitcoin Core, the host. You're gonna hard fork that a couple times, and every time you do, you add all these new chains to it, and then the goal is to try and persuade everyone to switch from there. It's kind of like Islam or something. Right. You're trying to get everyone into the tent.
So the weird thing is this, so you end up then with you'd have two versions of Dash, right? You'd have
exactly. Dash, one that's in the fused thing, and one that's the regular Dash that we know today.
So fundamentally, I don't think it solves the problem, because what you end up with is like you'd have a bunch of people taking one Dash and selling it for the other Dash, depending on whatever they want. And you just end up with double the number of Dash coins. You would have a Bitcoin Cash situation, exactly the same. The difference is that one would decrease or increase the number of Bitcoins.
Okay. I think that's a lot simpler than you're making it out to be. I mean, I think the best thing really is to just maximize the number of investments that intelligent people would know something about how to use, because to me, that's what's been missing in Bitcoin is investment products that an intelligent person would know what to do with. See, as if you just have those, then that will attract the people that I'm interested in.
What do you mean by that, Daniel?
Well, so
I think I got it. I think what he's saying is that I shouldn't worry about it being too confusing to explain, because it just people will be able to figure out why they want it. That's maybe what I was thinking you were saying.
Yeah, so you should automate. If you can, you should automate these and just see how many you can turn on at once, as easily as possible. And I'm sorry, I have one more thing I want to go back to, because Joshua, earlier you said that that Paul might be taking a big risk by making the non-replay protection fork, but I would argue that the core developers are putting other people in a position where they have to take big risks when dealing with them, because they are not very good at being cooperative. Well, so I would argue that somebody who does take a big risk is increasing his chances of winning. It's because he is doing the thing that's more likely to be successful. But you should also try to be less risky in other areas. So you should, if there's one thing that's good to be risky, you also need to do other things with different communities that are less risky. So my third piece of advice is to also implement these on Bitcoin Cash, because people are going to be a lot more cooperative, or at least that's my impression.
I agree with you in principle, but my point is that reputational risk comes with it. It's a little bit of a different kind of risk than the other risks. So, for example, taking reputational risk and believing it is going to make it very difficult to be cooperative with other chains, because
they're going to be right. I think you're both right. I think I understand your point, Josh, is that you want to not be some guy who just tries things.
Oh, that's the guy that failed.
Only do right, exactly. You want to do only. You want people, when you try something, you want people to pay attention because of that guy.
Peter Todd is a good example of this. I mean, every single time a major project has happened on Bitcoin, Peter Todd will come out and say that he has a competing project that he's working on that's going to kill that project. Every single time. He's done it with Tyrion. I don't love Tyrion. It's not my favorite project, but Peter Todd hates Tyrion. He did it with Counterparty. He said that he had a competing project that was going to kill Counterparty. He's got all sorts. I think I heard him do it with Hivemind. I'm not sure, but like he's always got a competing project that's coming out someday that's going to kill the current state of like whatever. So like
he did it with Drivechain. He said client side validation.
Yeah, that's right. He did it with Drivechain. So like Peter Todd is a great example of someone that when he speaks about something coming out for Bitcoin, I am just like, I love you, dude, but like fuck your ideas. You've implemented exactly one thing. And I mean he's done amazing work, right? Like Nlock Time Verify, I think he was instrumental in putting together.
Check lock time verify.
Whatever. It's all the same, Paul. They all do the same thing. They all.
I think Joshua is bullshitting you here. Paul, talk is cheap. He's telling you to focus on whether people are listening to your cheap talk, and I don't think you should do that.
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying that that's a risk. I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is that like in the assessment of the risks going into something like this, I mean, because like threatening to fork Bitcoin is viewed as, and correctly viewed as, a hostile
incorrectly
viewed as. It is
it's cooperative act. It's correctly viewed as political and not technical. So
yes,
the question is like, is it better? Are you making it better or worse?
Well, that's the thing. Like,
I would like if we could do futures markets, then that would be the best of all, because that would be the lowest risk for everyone. We could see if anyone would like this idea enough to turn it on, and then that would be that.
That would be nice, right? Because then if you did a
but see, no one ever wants to do that. Maybe I could go and I could say, look, you might make some transaction fees. People are very rarely, as I've tried to hype prediction markets for years, it's very, really difficult to get anyone to care enough to add them, which is so, I would love if people would add them. But
why don't you do it on Augur, Paul?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So one day they'll launch. Still trying to get that Ethereum gas code. Still trying to crack that. Trying to crack that puzzle.
Do they even have a working product, by the way? I don't think that there's ever been a prediction made on Augur, as far as I can tell.
I don't. It depends what you mean by they haven't launched. So I think it depends what you mean by working product, right? Like, can you run a function somewhere there that doesn't crash?
That's a good question.
Probably. but yeah, they haven't launched. So
I think it's hilarious because, like, I mean, essentially that is what Augur is, right? It's a prediction market future.
Well, they kept changing it around. Like, I don't know what it.
What are they now? By the way,
I just mean they kept changing like the way they do things. But yeah, they try to be pure prediction market and decentralized Oracle thing, because they keep trying to make that work. But for some reason, it's taking them longer than they thought. I don't know why.
That's because the problem isn't as easy as they claimed.
Yeah, well, I just have to copy what I wrote down in my 80-page white paper. They just have to do that, or they could just copy the code that we wrote in.
80 pages is too long.
In 2015,
you should have given them check marks.
I know. I should give them a checklist. See, that's the problem with the ICO, which is that all this money is up front. All these people quit afterwards immediately. No motivation to finish the project. This is, endless. The incentive problems are terrible. Plus, they think it's just like, when people changed the block time to 2.5 minutes in Litecoin, people will they'll read the white paper for Truthcoin, and then they'll just think, well, I could change all these things.
Paul, what are the changes that need to be made in Bitcoin in order to have Drivechain work? I was going to call it Drivemind.
Yeah, we could. But yeah, there's two soft forks, and I have the BIP pull requests open. I can send them to you. I think they're like 643 and 642 are the pull request numbers. That's not the BIP numbers.
But fundamentally, just real quick, what are those?
The second one is blind merge mining, which is sort of optional, but I think it's just a no-brainer because of the way. That's like a long story, but I'm pro merged mining. I think most people don't understand what merge mining is, but. So we could have that conversation if you want. But the Drivechain one is
nobody understands merge mining.
You have to keep track of basically everyone has to keep track of the deposits into the sidechain and the withdrawals. But the deposits are regular transactions, and the withdrawals are very rare, and they have to accumulate these little upvote, downvotes.
So it's like Tether.
Well, the more that you
like,
threaten to do a fork, the more you're improving your reputation with me, as long as I think it's credible.
Yeah, this is see, that's smart. Dan has now made it so that I can only get one type of reputation at once, which is clever because I only care really about his reputation with him.
Right, because I'm the emperor of Bitcoin, so that's all that matters.
You guys are here as my spiritual advisor. And, yeah, Dan Krawisz is Yahweh.
He's going to try to be. He's trying to be the devil on your shoulder, Paul.
I'm in the center, and I don't want to be on the side with Vitalik. I want to be in the center.
Yeah, I do think that like forks are really difficult, and I mean, here's the thing, like the question of a hard fork, a sort of malicious hard fork, if you will, or political hard fork, is that like who would you bring with you? Because a lot of the core developers wouldn't come.
I know, but that's the point of the GitHub replay part, is that I just commit to no riders in the using of your bill metaphor, which is perfect.
So literally it would just be the Drivechain implementation.
Right. And so even that, and I would just try to make it as, it would be sort of like Namecoin.
And you'll give it back to Vladimir when he wants it.
I think I really would.
Vladimir, here you go. You can have my implementation. It's the new one.
I thought about that, and I think I would have to, because I think, as I said before, if I needed to take control of it a second time, it would just, if as long as the ideas were still worse.
Because you're not really a programmer, right, Paul?
Yeah, it's true that I'm really not very good, especially with C++, which is the language of Bitcoin.
The language of Bitcoin.
The language of Bitcoin, which is, of course, it's not really the language of Bitcoin at all, but it's the language of, whatever. The Bitcoin, I need to speak it for this one purpose. But yeah, I'm not very, I mean, of course I am in some sense. Like I worked as a programmer.
I feel like you're a programmer a la Adam Back in the way that he's a programmer. Like
I think so, yeah.
You can do basic programming, but it's conceptual programming more than anything. It's sort of like Lockean programming, where you're like talking about the state of nature.
In like, Lockean. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, like I'm very uninterested in like memory management and like security and like so I'm. In terms of like small, low level like language type things like that. So I'm not actually interested in computer science itself. I am interested in using. I'm just basically interested in solving problems.
The Luka Perchich guy keeps saying that like Federated is more secure than Drivechain.
That's an interesting point of view. I don't agree. It depends on what you mean by secure. It's like one signature is more secure than any amount of hash rate. But the point, again, is that Satoshi invented mining. This is the cat. We got a cat. We got 4 people now. We need to ask the cat's advice.
Well, explain that, Paul. It's one signature is more secure than mining, which frankly is the basis of like proof of stake.
Yeah. Well, the point of mining is that we recover in case a meteor strikes all the mining equipment and blows it up, or in case the mining equipment does the wrong thing. Or in case all the miners lose interest and they take up different hobbies and they need to stop, we have some way for the network to proceed. But if you have the federated thing and you lose the 5 or 6 people, then you got to find 5 or 6 more people out of whatever it is.
And the state of the network is questionable.
Right. You don't know how long they've been misleading you or doing anything else. So it's just different. It's like those people would maybe be arrested by the government or just killed by the mafia or something like that. Like it's just a totally different thing.
Well, it's a different set of risks, right? Like that's essentially what it is. Like,
and the scaling is much worse because it's fine when it's just you and your friends and you get $200 in there. But if you have $200 million in there and it's just 5 people go rogue, 5 out of 9,
which is completely feasible.
It's totally feasible, and they split it among themselves. Like, why that will eventually happen? Like, there's no way. So it's $40 million each.
There's no contract between like the federated, the holders of the federated pegs and the holders of the coins on the chain. So like
not officially, and not in computer science, and not legally, and not.
So the question is, do like in a federated peg model, does that mean that you yourself, the person who has decided to run this federated peg or this federated node, are you in fact a fiduciary of the people on the chain? Which is it's a completely different legal consequence and a completely different question than you have to ask with miners, because miners are not fiduciaries in any way.
Right, I think you're right. The federated people would be fiduciaries, right?
I think they have to be,
right?
In order for there to be any teeth to the law.
They're in charge of other people's monies.
Which is fucked up because you have 6-year-olds running pegs or running federated nodes.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. Is like, how are we gonna pick these people?
I would pick like El Chapo and like
yeah, exactly. They would need like their own social security. I mean, not their own Secret Service.
Maybe Donald Trump could run one.
Yeah, I know some 6-year-olds who would be great at it.
I'm sure they would be great, but like, is that like you honestly?
All my nieces, all my cousins, and like at least other really young people, friends of mine. To do it.
I like the idea of a factum, for example, being run by a bunch of like 11-year-old guys in their home running these federated nodes. But I mean, fundamentally, like I think the Drivechain thing is a really amazing idea. But I don't know, Paul. Like the use case that I see for it, because I don't love the fusion idea for the reasons that I was saying earlier. I think fundamentally what you do is basically get people who really buy into the Dash premise. You double their coins, they would sell them for Bitcoin and then buy more Dash on the old chain.
I'm a little worried about it myself. It may be too many weird things at once, but let's talk about it later. But you were saying, continue, please.
Right. So I think that fundamentally the reality of the sort of Drivechain or the Drivechain problem is that the only real use case at the moment, as far as I can see, are two. Number one, Drivechain being used for like upgrading Bitcoin. I think that's a pretty cool idea. That was something Luke Dash Jr. had suggested to me. The second one is HiveMind. Right.
Yeah, I think you're right to bring that up. I think there are more. One is that I think you could what you might do is you might say, okay, instead of fusion, I'm going to hard fork Bitcoin Core, and then I'm going to add a sidechain of Bitcoin of the forked Bitcoin Core, which maybe you would call Bitcoin Cash, or you would call it like Bitcoin Giant Block or something like that. And that one, you could actually double everyone's money. So everyone across the board. So there's no inflation tax. There's 42 million coins instead of 21. Exact same owners. And then you could say that chain could have a really large block size. You could run the large block, very, very large block experiment over there. And you could run the small block experiment at the same time on the same network. And you could kind of try to get. See, it would be difficult because if you didn't do that, you would be basically asking the Bitcoin Cash people to jump ship. But you would be saying that they have to admit that Bitcoin BCH is they should give up on that and do this other thing. So it's kind of difficult to please all the groups at once. Maybe
all you have to do is make your what did you call it? Your merging. What word did you use? Fusion. Yeah, the fusion. Just make the fusion a better investment than Bitcoin Cash.
I know.
Well, it fundamentally would be.
That's true.
Well, I have a question. I have a fundamental question about Drivechains specifically to the fusion point. In thinking about the fusion thing, one of your arguments about Drivechain and its efficacy has been the idea that Drivechain is essentially pegged to Bitcoin, which is a good point, right?
Well, that's the way it works. Is that you the coins you could earn on the sidechain, you could redeem for real Bitcoin Core.
So
and weird non-sidechain Bitcoin.
So my question to you is, can you break the peg by pre-mining?
What do you mean by that?
So like, why not distribute to the earliest people on your chain, 100,000 of your coin, and then anyone who comes on that like deposits Bitcoin into the peg, they're now going to get some fraction of the coins that are allotted for like those, those that are mined, right? So now you have more coins than are in the peg, essentially, meaning that early adopters would hold the most money, and those who come later would hold some value of the coins in the peg asymptotic to like some lower amount.
I think it would still work that way, even if you did nothing. I think I can answer your question a couple of different ways, I think, which is making me very concerned that I didn't understand it. But I think the fusion thing would be its own coin, like Bitcoin Fusion. Oh my God, everyone register that domain name quick. Just kidding.
Done.
But yeah, probably that's a lost cause already. But the Bitcoin Fusion coin would be its own coin. It would have its own market price, so it would rise and fall. So still the early adopters would buy in at the cheapest in a world where it was ultimately successful. So that's already the case. You could, to your specific question, I think, you could create a bunch of coins in this system that were that would only show up slowly over time. So you kind of create them via inflation, and then
just let me like
coins that way.
Right. So let's say you have a sidechain with 10,000 coins total. That's the issuance, right? And you pre-mine 5,000, right? So like you issue the sidechain with 5,000 already issued to the people, like to maybe 200 people, and then someone wants in on your sidechain, so they deposit into the peg 1 Bitcoin, so that they get some issuance of like whatever this is, right? But like now in the peg, there's only 1 Bitcoin, and it's distributed among the 5,000 pre-mined coins plus like whatever that person has purchased.
I see. I don't think that. I understand your question, but I don't think anyone would do it like that, because what they would say is, I don't want to put a coin in. Instead, they'd want to do a swap or something. I think it's kind of like no one would want to do that. I think
you're right that it would seem that no one would want to do it, but like, I mean, this is Bitcoin, so
I know, right? Like I know, like, why would I even say that? Like, but I think
please just make the most interesting investment toys for intelligent people to play with. Those are the only people whose reputation. Among whom your reputation matters, in my opinion.
I don't actually think that is true, because of what I wrote about the Esperanto. It is. You do have to. I think I do have to worry about bringing over a lot of people. I think it is like did I use the party metaphor, or did I delete that part? I think.
Okay, wait. No, I disagree. I think that you have to worry about bringing the first group of people over. And that's really your only job, okay? They have to worry about bringing the next group of people.
The noobs.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, because we have this problem a lot in society today, where everyone knows that we shouldn't. No one likes the Republican or Democratic, either of the candidates, and we know that everyone hates them, but we know people can't all switch at the same time, and so that's just. This keeps happening.
And now we're going to have The Rock be president.
Yeah, we have the maybe we'll get like maybe Oprah next, or something like that. Like why not? It sounds like it's on the table.
Well, I think Oprah would be a great president. Yeah. So
here, you heard it first here, everyone. Running.
Oh my God. Okay. So I mean, Paul, what else you got for us? What other questions?
Well,
I feel very unqualified to answer anything from the great.
No, but it's like, no, it's
the smartest man in Bitcoin.
I don't even know if any, I think it's a good sign now, because most of the people who say that they're qualified are totally on a different planet, in a bad way. But yeah, I mean, the question is really just like what to do next, and so we're trying to make it a little specific, I think. So I'm not sure if. I think what we were just talking about was, is it really enough to just make something that's better? And I don't think that is enough. I think
no, that's not enough. That's not what I'm claiming.
Okay, but you say that all I need is to bring the first group over. So
but that group, the reason they're coming is because they have concluded that it can win eventually.
Okay, but what do I do about core versus cash? I just no cash, because it's sort of like how I sort of was leaning, but I don't know. I think it's an open question.
Oh, I think you should also do cash. I think you should
do it separately.
Time.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
the
code
kind of difficult, because
the code I think is difficult, Paul. Like the code element, but like why can't you submit a BIP to cash as well?
Well, it would be a lot of work. But it would probably be less work, though, because they are open to hard fork. So I could just be like hard fork version.
I mean, it would maybe Litecoin, because like Charlie Lee loves to
I thought about that Bitcoin. Well. I thought about that. Yeah, like that would be great. He does love to do that, because he just loves to pump Litecoin with.
Of course he does. It's so fun.
So good for him. I mean, I think. It's funny, Charlie Lee. It's kind of like how you guys said, like Marco Santori is like the smartest guy in all of Bitcoin. Something. It's kind of like Charlie Lee. It's kind of like I'm getting some kind of weird little vibes when I think about Charlie. I'm like, did he like just totally outsmart everyone? Or
you feel it in your pants too. So like, yeah, I mean, but like that's the thing. Charlie Lee like pumps Litecoin for years and then like sells out.
And then, well, like he says he's got the best of all worlds, because people think that he sold out.
Yeah, maybe it's great. He may or may not have. It doesn't matter.
It's like, exactly right. He's just like, so did
the beauty of
like,
the anonymous function here is that you can say anything you want. No one can really verify or de-verify what you said.
It's like a Kobayashi Usual Suspects. He's just like, what percent of it is real? Like, we don't know.
Man. Well,
so yeah. So
I really think that, like, the whole point of this discussion is post-maximalism. So that means you do need to subdivide your efforts if you are a post-maximalist. So I think the best way to subdivide your efforts for now is the Bitcoin index fund.
Okay, so like basically the same project, one of each. Do I hard fork or soft fork cash? I think it's
I guess soft fork if they are interested in being cooperative and will, just willingly include it in some future version.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea.
I don't think that going to cash is in any way a bad. Here's the thing: like, I think that there's a lot of hate for Bitcoin Cash, but like Bitcoin Cash is it serves a lot of purpose. I have to say that like SegWit would not have been implemented if it weren't for Roger Ver farting on everybody's face. He's a great villain. He's put himself out there as a foil, and as a result, like, I think that the fact that we do have a SegWit implementation on Bitcoin is largely the result of him complaining stupidly. And
Jihan Wu, he's also a great villain.
Yes.
They're just like, oh, here he is. Oh, he's not even from this continent.
You know as well as I do that when Roger Ver makes criticisms. Hello, I am Jihan Wu.
Yeah,
exactly, when Roger Ver makes criticisms.
What are they up to over there?
Right. When Roger Ver makes
criticisms, much better villain than either of those guys.
Well,
honestly, you got a lot. You got your work cut out.
Daniel, you need a darker, blacker cat in order to be honest. But like you hear whenever Roger Ver talks about Bitcoin, like, he sounds like he has no idea how this thing works. His entire premise is political, and yet he's mustered sort of the crowd to like develop.
Okay, I disagree. I think his premise is to make money. I think his premise is to get rich. He's
already rich. So that's I reject that premise. He's already made his money. I think his entire premise is ideological.
No, people who are rich want to get richer.
I really think he does very earnestly believe all that stuff he says about economic freedom and
I think if he doesn't, I'd be astounded, because like he doesn't need, like, he's rich enough that he could just not do anything.
That's not how being rich works. Show me one rich person who doesn't want to get richer.
Mark Cuban was a great example of it, and he sat basically idle in his mansion for like 6 or 7 years before he ventured back into the game. And I think
the Gates Foundation, everyone involved with that.
He sounds like a good guy, but I think
once you win the game, like you sometimes you turn it off.
You take a break.
Everyone acknowledges that Warren Buffett and Gates could have more. Like, they're like, okay, you won, uncle.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. But someone who could have more doesn't mean that they were not increasing their net worth.
Yeah, I'll put it this way: there's a point at which you can sit back and do nothing, and make $1 billion or $10 billion a year, and no matter what you do, no matter how much effort you put into some other project, you will make a fraction.
Yeah, but you will still spend some of your time maximizing your net worth, even if it is a smaller amount.
I think you are either growing or dying, so it's hard to just shut it off and say that I've been making all this money for years and now I'm just going to totally shut it off. But yeah, I don't think that's different from the question of why is Roger Ver trying to get Bitcoin Cash.
I think he's ideologically aligned with it. I think that's largely why.
I think at this point it's got to also be revenge minded on all these people who have been just like being very, very, nasty to him, and sort of all this.
There's a lot of vitriol around Ver, like
he's done a lot for Bitcoin itself. So it's like, that's got to be like kind of, if there's one thing I totally 100% understand is motivate, a good revenge motivation. I just love that one. Maybe the three of us are just projecting our own motivations.
I'm sorry, but to me, the cult-like atmosphere of the Bitcoin core community does not look encouraging as an investment prospect.
No, I agree, but is it really that much better in cash? It's
I was going to say they're all the same though, Daniel. Like every one of
sorry, I think when I went to the Bitcoin Cash conference, I met the most people who are actually interested in real world problems.
I don't know. I mean, when you look at like our BTC or something, you just see these pylons that are very, very, very uninspiring.
And I would say
you can't listen to Reddit at all.
Yeah.
When I go to the Bitcoin conference, I meet the most investors.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. I mean, and then of course I think you must have noticed that
investors aren't equal. Okay.
Well, I get that, but like, what do you mean real world problems? Because like I think that everyone is interested in solving. Everyone's here because of that, and I think that your point is well taken. That, like,
I don't agree.
Some people are like
I don't agree at all. Anybody who is not. So you were just talking about the plane metaphor at the beginning of this discussion. Okay, so the whole idea of the plane metaphor is that the people piloting the plane are not focused on real world problems because they are piloting it from the ground. See, so that's sort of my problem right there.
Yeah, well, like it's not a real plane, and it's not, like we can recover the state of the blockchain.
No, I think it's a great metaphor. I think it's a great metaphor.
No, I agree. That's what I'm saying. Is the people who who use the plane metaphor are not using it right, because they're saying that we're all irreplaceable human beings.
So to me, focusing on real world problems means talking about maximizing value by connecting uses that people would want in the outside world to reasons that people would want to buy the coin.
But think about this. I give this example I can't remember which one. I think I must have put it in Post-Maximalism. I give the example of two ways of doing that, and both the large blockers and the small blockers were not interested in.
Oh yeah, I want you to explain that, because that was something that I wanted to ask about. So yeah, tell me about the details for both sides.
So I brought up the fork futures idea, although I didn't have a great name for it, and that was when I was getting called off the stage that Josh was mentioning earlier. But I had plenty of time to get through that first part though. But I was saying that we could just do this thing. If you saw, some people have been talking recently, including Mike Kern, who did the AMA, that it's really about governance. And as I was saying, it's really the debate is about over one thing. The scaling debate is about actually the node costs, and is not actually about transactions per second throughput. And so I said you could do this fork futures thing, where we would be able to tell which side would be more valuable after the fact, and then the miners would have to mine that, because it's costing the same amount of hashing to mine either chain, but they get more money with one than with the other. So if one is 10% more than the other, then it should get 100% of the mining revenue. It's not like it'll be split 60-40 or 55-40, 45 or something. It's just whichever one's more valuable, that will decide the fate of the future of the project anyway, and the other one will stall out because the difficulty will be too high. And so I said all that stuff. That's all that stuff that I said in 2015. That
came to fruition.
It all ended up happening with Segwit 2x.
I think that the whole also, and I think that the Bitcoin Cash thing showed us that miners are fundamentally rational on that as well. Like they were switching back and forth as it became more profitable to mine one or the other.
Right, I think so too.
Which I thought was amazing. Like how fast, like the barrier to moving chains is zero in these scenarios. And I found that to be just remarkable. That if there's liquidity there for the miners to like basically dump their coins, or to sell or whatever they want to do, that they will make that rational decision. And they're quick
let me finish, because Dan asked a specific question, and I was careful to include this because I think it's very important, which is that we had with Segwit 2x, we had a situation where I said we should do these futures, and people ignored me again. And you even did a video about it, Dan. And
Well, wait. Now, who are you talking about? Which people?
Well, it is difficult because I think
exchanges.
Yeah, like I said that if someone wants to propose a change, I said probably the onus would be on them to at least create these futures and show us that they're not arguing for the destruction of, our wealth. So I think the status quo is worth something, and so it shouldn't be on you. But then I switched later on. I said, well, you could do a lot of these great things, and it would be very quick and easy, very, very, very efficient and simple if we just had the exchanges do it. And it so happened that the exchanges ended up doing it at around that time. They didn't do it quite the way I wanted it to be done, but Bitfinex and a couple people did simple versions of those futures markets, and they said that 1x would be more valuable than 2x. And in fact, it was split 85-15, which is basically still, if you take the market caps and add them together and divide them, 85-15 is kind of like very consistently what it has been, which is kind of interesting, just to note as a side fact. But the point was, it said 2x would only be worth 15% or whatever, and the 1x would be worth 85%. And you would think that you would then call it off, or at least call it off as being a Bitcoin replacement, and say, well, this thing will be worth 15% of some giant number, so we should still do it. But it's not what the community wants. And so they were not interested in that. And so the large blockers have been on the losing side of the fork futures consistently, and they don't acknowledge that. And they're not interested in when I try to help them out by saying, okay, you could make the futures markets more accurate. So you could
what size block do you want?
I could say like something like you could say per block size. You could say we could cancel out these confounding factors, and then so you still have a chance. You still have a tiny chance that the futures markets can say that you're in the right, but they're never interested in that either. So the large blockers are never interested in the fact that they are not actually maximizing the value. And then, but the other thing is that I mentioned the coin voting, where it's the reverse case, where originally we had this thing, the Bitcoinocracy, and it was totally pro large block. And I can't find it, and I've been looking for it for months, but I can't find it. There's a part where Greg Maxwell is talking to Roger Ver on Reddit, and he tells him that that it's nonsense that most people prefer small blocks, because when you actually do the coin voting, they favor small blocks, not large blocks. But then something weird happened where it flips. It flips like twice, and then you get all the people on one side start advocating for the metric, and then it flipped again, and all those people left. And right now, that metric, which is much worse than the fork futures metric, but that metric is totally overrun by large blockers. They more coins statically voting at no risk to themselves, but more coins favor for this narrow voting metric. So more coins will do the cheap talk of saying that they want larger blocks, but it doesn't mean that no one really cares. So it's like it's a kind of a giant. It's a giant like set. I would like to have fork futures for anything that tries to compete as a fork, because then you could get a really good glimpse as to where you really stand. But it's really hard to get people to be interested enough in adding them, and even when you add them, people just try to dispute the relevance, even though it's perfectly relevant.
Okay, well, because that's good you said that, because I was just about to dispute the relevance there, because I think that the different camps are competing in a lot of ways other than block size. So I agree that we should have a fork futures market, but I don't agree that if you I would like the future to mean nothing more than whatever protocol change it's supposed to be about. But right now we've got protocol changes, and we've got different groups of people with different overall ideas about what they think Bitcoin is. So I would argue that
You would say that cash is not only about a block size change,
right?
But are you saying it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I'm just happy that there is some kind of experimentation happening that is closer to what I think is intelligent.
Are you an advocate, Daniel, of bigger blocks? Is that?
I am an advocate of whatever will maximize the value of Bitcoin.
Yeah, but I just like when you look at the Bitcoin Cash community, you know, I don't know. Like I don't really like either community. I'm sorry to say at this point. It's like it's authoritarianism versus like communism.
Well, I think in some ways, Paul, like the evolution of money is something that like this is what I said about our meetup groups. Like if Bitcoin works, this Bitcoin meetup group is going to be like a really stupid idea because it's going to be like having a dollar bill club, right? Like in some ways, the community eventually has to not matter if this is going to be a value, right? It has to eventually be sort of disambiguated from the fact that there is a Bitcoin core and a Bitcoin Cash and like a Litecoin community. They have to just be like people that it just has to kind of be this ubiquitous sort of like medium of exchange, which is kind of a neat world to think about. But like, I think that's the reality that you're seeing is that you're just seeing a bunch of assholes enter, and that's kind of what you want.
I know. I think you're right about that. It's good of you to say that because I think that you are kind of right. Like we are getting all of the, that is exactly.
You want the assholes.
Yeah. It's horrible though, but it is, they're really good at being assholes.
Well, you got, and what you have to do is you have to remove yourself from the fact that like you liked the Bitcoin community. We were early adopters. We were here before anyone else. And that was, you know, we pushed this technology forward in the sense of like the fact that we were looking at it and touching it and using it and playing with it. And I think that's a really neat position to have been in, but like it was for the masses. It's always been for the masses, and the masses are filled with idiots and assholes. And the original Bitcoin group, I mean, I don't know that we were much different. It's just that we were assholes and idiots with like a sort of specific goal in mind, and we were all working toward it. And that's not the case anymore. You know, it's the March of Dimes problem. When you solve the problem that you were formed to like create, you have to change your purpose. And I think that Bitcoin's kind of at that inflection point where like the people that are here are no longer the ideologues. We're not here just because like, you know, you're not here because you're an anarchist anymore, right? You're here because like you want to make money. You're not here. You're no longer breaking up with your boyfriend because he's mega into this Bitcoin thing. Now you're like having sex with him because he's mega into this Bitcoin thing and he's very rich. So like, I mean, like we're in a different world, and the community is sort of a dead concept. I think it can die. I think it has to die in order for this to work.
Okay, so I think this has been very helpful in general. I think Dan Krawisz gave the real advice, but just try it. It's kind of like have a control group, really. It was just like you try it on both and a soft fork if possible, but make sure that it does exist with both communities. I think that is smart. I think that's better than the weird fusion experiment. Although I think it's funny to have that, and that's a good way to like recover if people decide that they changed their mind about something, or I think someone will probably do it anyway.
Yeah, I think you should also do the fusion eventually. Maybe that should be step 2, though.
Yeah.
And Paul,
no, I think you should be like a slime mold. Remember, you told me that Bitcoin is like a slime mold, so you should be like a slime mold.
Yeah.
That's better than having a good reputation.
Okay. I have to think about that one.
And to your point, I think it's very hard to give. And I mean, like, I think Daniel's advice is very good. For me, it's very difficult to give advice because, like, yeah. I think that we're talking incredibly nuanced sort of problems that have like all sorts of inputs and all sorts of possible outputs. And it's very like you won't know whether this is the problem that you were at the start saying with the sort of the Hayekian world where like right. You don't know that you're right until later on. And you don't even know that when the market or whoever decides you're right, you don't even know if it's right. Because, yeah. Like right now in America, for example, we're voting on all of these companies that are running profitlessly and have no prospects of profits ever in the future. Like, is the market right for like condoning that behavior? I don't know, but it seems to be working. And those people seem to be walking home with a lot of money. So like, it's difficult for me to like give you outright advice other than to just say, here's, and looking at like the writing and the papers and from what I know about Bitcoin, here are the possible pitfalls, because I don't know that there's a right answer.
Well, very right. Well, that's that is the high. You're right. That's very smart of you to bring up. See, I know you were trying to be dumb, but you failed again. God, and the Hayek point is very good, because it's like that is kind of a small contradiction. And we're coming here to try and pick. But did you notice Dan Krawisz actually escaped the? He just said I should just do everything.
Yeah, no, I think his advice is it's you should do the Hayekian thing and do everything.
Okay,
and then see which idea is best.
But that's not okay. What you should also figure out the way to, you were talking about it being a lot of work. I mean, you also need to minimize the amount of work you're doing. Yeah. So it's a constraint. So you need to find out what is the work that you can do that maximizes your ability to be like a slime mold.
But also avoid the false quadratomy. Like there may be a fifth solution, Paul. Like, for example, have you bothered to pick up the phone and call Luke Dash Jr.?
I know, that's the thing. Is I really haven't, because I just thought I was taking the hint. But that would be funny if that were.
You should not internalize that shit, because like Luke is a busy guy, but he's also like he's got teeth problems, so you never know what like dentist. He might be at the dentist, right? And maybe he's been at the dentist for 6 days. Maybe he's the first person ever to like be at the dentist as an inpatient. I don't know. And maybe you're a real asshole for not knowing that. So like maybe just pick up the phone and talk to him, because like I bet you that there might be just a completely reasonable reason. Maybe he's got some issues with it that that are legitimate and that you haven't thought of yet. But there's probably a fifth, sixth, and seventh option that you haven't considered, and per Daniel's principle of do everything, and do the most efficient things. Maybe one of them is the most efficient.
Yeah, and you see, it's not just really about that though, because as I say in the paper, it's about this entire phenomenon, pervasive, years-long phenomenon of just not being as interested in this.
I agree. I mean, I remember at Satoshi Roundtable, when I went in my miner costume, one of your frustrations there was
you looked really convincing as a Chinese miner.
I did. I was a
sombrero. You had a sombrero.
Well, we weren't ethnic miners. We were Hispanic miners, coal miners, if you will. You should have seen the look on my face. The funniest thing was I was looking. You didn't know that we were there.
I didn't even know the disguise was so strong. I didn't even know it was them for like 4 or 5 seconds.
I was reading like all of the Slack, because it's funny because like a lot of people told us about this Satoshi Roundtable, and you're like, this is what happens, because it was just like a bunch of stupid going on. You're like, this is what happens. They don't allow Junseth and DeRozan, and like sure enough, there we were outside as you guys came out.
It looks like I planned it. It looks like I knew that they would come. Really I did not know at all.
Paul's the one who gave us the location, so but Paul, no, like I do think that there's other options, and I think your question there was like, why isn't Adam back reading my paper? And that was a frustration that you had there, and I think that's a frustration that has echoed sort of the entire project, right? You've been frustrated that the science of what you're doing, the papers that you're writing, the good work that you're doing is sort of being ignored academically, and I think that's a legitimate frustration.
It's not so much that, I mean, people can, they can use their own time however they like.
Of course
I do a lot of writing. It's weird. I really do not do the writing so that other people will read it. I have to.
You obviously don't, because it's so
exactly. I know, and it is kind of obvious.
Read a Herman Melville novel every time you have like a fart.
They are kind of like an encyclopedia, but it's just I write them down to just make it clear in my head, and then I just get it out of my head.
You must have the longest pooping sessions ever, because that's the only place. Like 4 hours later, like, Paul, where were you? I was pooping and writing.
Yeah, I was writing a blog, writing one and so it is for I do it for my own benefit, but I think it is weird for people to make make these claims about it. People do try to elevate their claims, which is, I think, very hypocritical sometimes. So they say the community wants this or doesn't want that, but they're totally uninterested in like any objective measurements of like community sentiment. So that is one thing that I just think is just outright.
Or they foist sentiment that is utterly idiotic because like a year from now that sentiment has changed, right?
Right.
And that
it's
can
like,
be used against
at a certain point, there are like a basic offenses to like truth and you know, to like mankind that you just can't kind of be totally neutral about. You just have to be like dislike it mildly at least. So it's like so there are some things that I just think are kind of ridiculous, but yeah, I don't think I think in particular the sidechains thing, when you have something that has consumed so much effort, the scaling debate has consumed so much effort, and all these people have like donated all this money to fund these conferences, all this travel, and I just see kind of duplicity because it's like there's progress made on solving the real problem, which I think is kind of being passed over for bad reasons, which is bad incentive reasons. Because I think as I've explained, it is clearly not just about getting the transactions per second numbers up. It is about how do you make decisions with a community where people disagree with each other. And so I had all this stuff to say about those more important questions, and people aren't interested in it. And those people also charge, you know, they're also like consultants who are paid by the hour. So I'm not exactly sure what, you know, or there are people who just think that they have giant egos and they're really great. So it's hard to know what to do with that.
Well, I definitely think that I have a giant ego and that I'm really great.
I have a tiny id.
I have a tiny super ego.
All right. I have to go record Junseth's World, Paul.
Oh, great. Okay.
Getting into that.
Oh, this is like what is this? This is Junseth's.
This is the precursor. I'm gonna take the audio from this. I'm gonna put it up for us too. So, I think it's a great discussion, frankly.
Oh yeah, no, it's been really helpful for me. I actually got the real advice that I am actually very happy with this, and I'm glad that you brought up the conflict of interest, because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to both of you, is that I didn't really know exactly what on earth to do, because there are so many objective and subjective reasons.
The whole thing is a weird problem, because you're trying now to appeal to a whole new set of people who never really gave a fuck about sidechains, right? Noobs, the new people here, they didn't go through the emotional response that we all did when sidechains were announced. They don't understand that these things are cool and important, and that there was a world where like everyone was amazed by the possibility of sidechains. There was a day when
reverse like the constant annoyance when you would have like the next Dan Larimer project would roll around,
and there was a day when sidechains really were like, I mean, you should have heard people like this, like everything was possible on sidechains, every fucking thing, and they were the magical fruit.
2014 they did Let's Talk Bitcoin, I think, or something like that, and then I think Adam Back says something like, we believe that this is the most important thing for anyone to work on ever, or something. It's like December 2014 or something. You can look that up. It's like you can Google it. It's Googleable.
The only thing that has ever been more hyped than sidechains, by the way, was Circle.
That's
another.
What about what the heck was? Well, I mean, Ethereum was so hyped.
Fuck yeah! But no one remembers Circle. I mean, do you remember Circle? How like that dominant, like it was going to change the world, and like I was like, this is fucking Coinbase.
I mean, honestly, just like blockchain alone is so much hype too.
Well, now, yeah,
contender too.
But like, I just mean in the Bitcoin community, like I just think that the weird issue that you're running into here is that you're like contending with the fact that like you have a bunch of new people who don't really know what this technology does, and they're enamored with new things. They're enamored with Lightning Network. They've not seen sort of the hype cycle of Bitcoin, where like every new idea is the most important idea ever created, and that every single new idea is going to be the be all and end all savior of the entire system.
As soon as we get masked, it'll all be everything will be different. The sky will be green, and
Mimblewimble had its
fly the sky.
Mimblewimble was proposed to like, holy fuck, this is going to change everything. And I mean, like Bitcoin fungibility is something that hasn't really been touched.
It's funny.
Wait, I just thought of something. Why didn't I bring this up earlier? Sorry, real quick.
Because you just thought of it, Daniel.
We were just talking about, well, Paul was saying earlier, I think if you're going to make a fork, you should do a fork futures. So you should start by making a fork futures of the forks that include Drivechains.
No, but I would I was trying to say that I would like to, but it's very difficult to like convince people that they should do that. And yeah, I don't know if it would be like a good idea to try to like ask them very nicely and then offer money or something. But like, it's really hard to get people to actually, because you need the fork futures you kind of run into the same counterparty problem where it has to be like people are trusting you with you're like keeping track of everyone's money. So you have to basically you either have a weird problem to solve, a new problem, or you need an exchange to help you. So you need to get an exchange to agree to do this. The exchanges, they're making all this money off of like, Ethereum.
Okay. Well, I guess we should just say that we would enjoy having that information available if anyone were to create such a conflict as your project is proceeding.
So that's interesting, is that you could create a big conflict and then hope that it draws the futures markets in. That would be great. Yeah.
You should pay attention to Craig Wright's cult leader techniques.
I was going to say, that's what I was going to say. We didn't get a chance to bring it up because we were talking about core cult, and now it's like, what the heck,
No, I think Craig Wright is simply an independent cult leader.
Yeah, he's called him Craig or something.
But I strongly want him to be Satoshi, by the way. I've been thinking about this a lot.
Because it would be like the season 7 finale, and it would just be like, oh my god, like what could possibly happen after that?
Well, no, like what I like is this. So like there's 2 kinds of Satoshi that are excellent. Number one, 3 kinds. Number one is the elected Satoshi. Right now we have the elected Satoshi. Like that's every few years people get to throw their hat in the ring and they duke it out. We had Dorian Nakamoto for a while, and now we have Craig Wright. The second one is the anonymous Satoshi, which is what we had at the beginning. We elected an anonymous Satoshi.
He's very mythical. Yeah,
he's mythical. Yeah. The third one is the real Satoshi, and the real Satoshi
somewhere who has a shady past.
Right. Well, the thing is this: like Craig Wright is an objective dum-dum, and like all that it would prove is that you can be really stupid and sometimes stumble on a great idea, and then what everyone would be like, "Well, that's fine. It's fine." Like that means that we are free. We are free. Right. Yeah, we're completely free from these like ideas of early Satoshi, like the idea of the vision of Satoshi. Oh, like we don't need to worry about that because Satoshi was really stupid, and he just happened to have.
We have a lot of trouble agreeing with Krawisz, right? Even if he was Satoshi, right?
And if he's Satoshi, you can disambiguate the stupid ideas from like the fact that like Bitcoin works, and that would be just fine.
That's a good point, Josh. It would be educating the world about ad hominem fallacy.
I've been masturbating a lot lately.
I want to tell you about my conversation that I had with Craig Wright.
Oh my God!
Because what you said is that he is an objective dum-dum. But one thing that I noticed from his Twitter account is that he makes references to the movie Being There. And if you've watched the movie Being There, you know that there's no such thing as an objective dum-dum.
I haven't seen that movie, so
you need to see the movie Being There. But
Daniel, in my world, everyone's an objective dum-dum. That's my thesis.
Sorry.
Well, that's ironically that's really the Karl Popper thesis.
So my conversation with him, all I did was I asked if he likes the movie Being There, just to confirm that he was doing references on Twitter, and he said yes, he likes Being There.
I think that's the most profound conversation that anyone's ever had with Craig Wright.
I'm definitely. I know what I'm doing later today.
My favorite thing, by the way, my favorite interview with him is when he says that we can put trash on the blockchain, and so that you can know who's littering.
Oh, when is that? That's the super old one, right?
That's a super old interview. Like when I got to Bitcoin didn't have a price.
I should say he did not specifically say that he enjoys the movie Being There, but he smiled as if he was remembering the movie. And if you have seen the movie, you know that is the perfect response.
Okay, I'm gonna have to watch this movie.
I know, like I have no choice but to watch it.
I have a sick dream where I want someone to do on like national TV to interview me and say, Junseth, what was the price of Bitcoin when you arrived? And I just want to sit there and say,
stare directly at the camera.
When I got the Bitcoin didn't have a price, and just leave it at that, and then just like leave it for the Bitcoiners to decide.
Just pretend that as you say that as if you are unaware of how utterly bizarre.
And I'm gonna look into the future and just be, when I got there, Bitcoin didn't have a price. And then I'm gonna launch into rhetoric about how Bitcoin is going to solve the trash problem. I'll just re-give his interview for Bitcoin.
That would be great.
It's similar to my Barron's horse semen article.
Yeah, that's not at all. Oh, that was a wonderful article. Second of all, my favorite Krawisz Wright interview is when he says that he's doing this once and then he will never be in front of a camera again.
Right, and then his
oh my god, I haven't seen
be in front of the camera. Amazing. Oh, you have to. It's the interview.
One.
It's the most.
It's the one where he's like swearing at everyone.
What's funny about that interview is I read about that interview in that like long form piece about,
which is amazing, and it's absolutely required reading if you want to know anything about Krawisz Wright. His own mother says that he's a pathological.
Oh yeah. She's like, I love him. I love my son, but he makes up a lot of shit. So, but that entire and that he believes it full on.
Yeah, and then N-Chain like fires him at one point in the story. I couldn't believe what I was reading, and then
it was an amazing story.
$50 to like bail him out of debt,
tax.
And then I like immediately like had to like tweet that as soon as I found that.
The whole story is amazing, but I read about it in there, and then the actual interviews were released, and like what that did is it confirmed a lot of the story, because like it was the most honest account of that interview that I could have ever read. I was like, oh my god, this guy just kind of like just wrote what happened.
No, yeah, the LRB One Review Books guy, that man is an unimpeachable third-party witness to he was hired by N-Chain. He appears to have total integrity. You got to just believe every word. It's the most believable thing you've ever seen.
And the end, he does a journalistic, like sort of Pete Rizzo thing where he's like, I don't know.
Exactly, right. It's for you to decide.
I don't know. He's a fucking flawed dude. But like,
nice
maybe,
guy.
I don't know. I can't evaluate the central claim, but I can tell you a lot of weird shit happened, and you just read about it. So
and when he writes these funny little sentences that are like, comma, unaware of the blatant duplicity or something or of the confusion in the room, period. And you're just like, imagine.
And what strikes me about that entire account is that it seems that like, so Mr.
Josh,
1, 2, 3, 4.
You 1 sec.
Yes.
Greatest thought. You have to interview that guy. You absolutely have to.
I would love to.
Find him an interview. You got to find him an interview.
I would love to. I mean, the writer, right?
Yeah, exactly. The guy wrote that long form thing.
The Mr. 1, 2, 3, 4 QWERTY ASDFG says, so much fun. Craig Wright did a horrible thing to Gavin. And you treat him like this funny prankster. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about Craig Wright. Yeah, he did a horrible thing to Gavin, and I think that Craig Wright fully believes that he did it to prove something that he felt like he needed to prove. I think that he fully believes that he is Satoshi.
That would be interesting.
I think he is a classic sociopath. I think what happened, Paul, is I think Craig probably had something to do with the early paper. I think he probably reviewed it.
He may have just weirdly had just enough to do with it, and he knows that those other people are dead or something.
If you've ever and maybe he knows who Satoshi was, but like if you know anything, if you've ever been in a play and you're a shitty actor like me, and you're given a small part, you will find very quickly that you are able to convince yourself that the play would not be able to happen if it weren't for you. And I think that's what's happened with him. I think that all of these things, like, I think he doesn't know how to use a private key, but he doesn't think that matters, because like that he's Satoshi, and he's willing to go to any length to prove that he is who he thinks he is.
It's a good idea. I think that's worth thinking about, that he may have had some kind of involvement, and he's just kind of like edging out, and he's just seeing what he can get away with. And
I don't think he's seeing what he can get away with. I think that he thinks that like the project couldn't have happened without him.
That's so interesting, because to me he looks like he's obviously someone who is seeing what he can get away with. So I don't know how we can look at him and get such different opinions about it.
Because I think that it's going to be it's a difficult claim to make to be such a public persona who doesn't full on believe what you're saying.
But I think that he knows that he can get away with it, because he's seen the movie Being There.
So I have to watch this movie now. It's
the central movie of Bitcoin, Being There. All right.
I know, it's funny. Josh, I thought you and Chris had it locked down, all of the pop culture of Bitcoin. I thought it was just all
I thought we invented the pop culture of Bitcoin, but apparently
okay. But you know how Christians will say, well, nobody would claim to be God. Even the other people that back then just said that they were like you know, not divine. They were just prophets. You know. But
that's based on a fundamental argument from C.S. Lewis, by the way, in which he says either Jesus was a lord, lunatic, or liar.
Right. Yeah. And so Craig Wright knew that people would think that.
I don't think so, and I
think he did. Okay, well,
I think
no way to know for sure, but that's kind of
must be some way to eventually.
It's the highest stakes bet in the world for him to have made.
No, I don't think there is a way to know for sure, because he will. If you ask him that, he will always just answer whichever way makes him look smartest.
But Daniel, assume that nobody would come out and say that they are Satoshi. In addition, I mean, he's playing mafia in the most amazing way. To assume that nobody else is going to come out and say, I am Satoshi, or that Satoshi wouldn't log into one of his old accounts and say, Craig Wright isn't me, or all sorts of things that could have happened. Like, it's a high stakes game of poker that I can only assume he's playing if he truly believes that he is Satoshi.
I don't think it's high stakes. I think he's just seeing what he can get away with and having fun. So I think it is not a high stakes game.
So what are the stakes? I mean, he could die, but like, other than that, what are the stakes really? If he's already like kind of humiliated himself, so it's all marginal, like,
Well, at this point, presuming that he didn't believe it in the first place, but I think he believed it. I
think you may be right, Josh, just because we have so many examples of people.
I've been watching a lot of Jordan Peterson videos, so I'm a psychologist now.
Yeah, now you're a psychologist. You can now cure depression from everyone.
Well, I can cause depression. Everyone knows that.
Definitely.
I haven't
couldn't you do that before?
Yeah, I've always been good at that.
We've seen a lot of people, and I hate to make fun of people, when they're not here, but we have, we can talk, like, it's like the Dan Larimer of Vitalik Buterin, like, ellipsis after that, like, all these people who think that they are doing these amazing projects. I don't want to be mean to people, but, like, yeah, we're talking like the Factum Honduras deal and other stuff like that, where people are like,
well, Factum
the greatest thing ever that we're doing, and it's like anyone could have done that. And
Factum firmly believed that the Honduras deal existed. And it struck me then.
So it's like,
it strikes me now. When I was in college, I was watching Scrubs with a group in my dorm, and across the screen came this like phone number. They wrote it down on like one of the pieces of paper. So in my dorm, we were like, hey, let's call that number. So we did. And on the other end of the line was the entire Scrubs cast. And
a recording or actual?
No, the actual cast. They were sitting there at the phone. And we talked to them, and we asked them questions.
The first episode, the first time this was when it was live.
No, it wasn't. It was like in the middle of the show. I don't know. It was amazing. So we called them and we talked about things like, what would we do to like be on Scrubs? So like they told us, and it was generic acting advice, like, get an agent and like, try out. But like I called everyone and I told them that I was going to be on Scrubs, and I firmly believed it. And that to me is what happened with the Factum Honduras deal, is that like Paul Snow was told by Honduras that they were considering it, and all these they were like, let's write a press release, we're in. And they did it, and they told the nation, and they solicited funds based on this, they
were really ahead. They broke new ground.
They sure did.
It's sort of just blatantly fake memes.
Completely fake. And now you ask them, they're like, well, the government's really slow. And I was like, well, that should have been a factor.
The amazing thing is, it's like I don't have a problem with the Factum project anymore, because everyone else has gone so...
They're the cleanest.
Far,
they're so fucking clean.
You can't even attribute it to them. It's just the atmosphere of craziness of Bitcoin.
Right. Like they're as clean as it got. They defrauded investors. They lied about things, and they're cleaner than everybody else.
I know. So it's like, and if everyone can fall for all this kind of confusion and fraud, then I agree with you that, and many of these people, as we say, don't even realize that they are crazy. So I think, yeah, why not? Craig S. Wright. Craig S. Wright is like the Tiger Woods of just being crazy in Bitcoin, right? That could totally be possible.
And I think that's the thing. Like, he's going to try to sue people. Or he's talking about suing them for defamation.
He's talking about that.
He may or may not.
Well, yeah, he's got a lot of money now, so he probably will.
And I think that it's going to be like, I mean,
that guy Calvin Iyer, I don't know him, but I think he's like threatened people and all this other weird stuff.
I mean, I think you do that when you firmly believe that you're telling the truth. And how is a court going to evaluate whether he signed a private key?
God, I mean, that's a sad They'll bring in expert witnesses, of course. But
of course they will, and they'll bring in people who believe in, like John Matonis, and
of course
they're gonna bring in all these.
You know, you can pay. You know, you can in the United States you can pay expert witnesses.
They're gonna and they're gonna bring in people, but they're gonna bring in people who are very credible Bitcoiners, who say they firmly believe it. And to us, they're not credible, but to like a court, they're gonna have credentials up the wazoo. You know, Don Tapscott might be a Craig Wright guy. I don't know. That guy wears a suit. He'll look great in court.
Yeah,
so like,
how's Joshua Junseth going to look in court?
Me, I'm going to wear a cat shirt.
Exactly.
Right.
They'll find you guilty immediately.
Right. They'll be, Junseth, is this you? And I'll be like, well, it is me. I was LARPing. But yeah, like I think they're going to bring people in that have suits and that who, you know, confirm his identity and what are you going to do as a jury? It's going to be very difficult to refute that. Anyhow, Paul, right, so I love you.
Yeah, Dan has transformed into
a deer,
a creature,
a mythical stag.
Well, it's a blue-haired stag. So
I think it's a stag, right?
I think if he doesn't, you know, he has to spend a certain amount of time in that form per day, or he becomes it permanently, something like that. Right?
He's an anamorph.
Yes, he has to go back to being. Can only be human for 2 hours at a time. Or he'll be stuck as a human, and he won't have his anamorph powers. Right? Those are the rules, something like that.
If you have 2 hours a day, if you're stuck in the animal, you'll be stuck as the animal forever. Remember,
I know, but you didn't understand. He's
the opposite.
The deer, and then
I got that.
The magical god creature gave him the blue cube again, and he could then. He's like the hawk. Don't you remember Tobias?
Tobias.
Hawk?
He's so. Are you saying that Daniel may be an Andalite?
Yes, he may. He may have Andalite technology.
All right, guys.
Oh my God! Credibility. If he wanted us to have no reputation, we didn't succeeded.
All right, let's sign off.
There you go. Reading too many books when you're a child. This is like the Bitcoin book club. That's the three of us.
Look at this. Dante's calling. I gotta go.
Okay.
Check it out. Use the South, the masses, and go. Peace and pray for us.
Okay. I don't know if Daniel's coming back, which makes it even more surreal to end the show here. But I'd like to say that I really appreciated talking with the both of them, and I think it was great. So I think it was a great conversation. So I hope everyone watching also enjoyed being led in to the Bitcoin Book Club. And so thank you for watching.